Evelyn Carter thought she had escaped. 15 months of silence, of safety, of rebuilding a life far from the darkness that nearly consumed her. But when her infant son stops breathing on a rain-lashed October night, every carefully constructed wall comes crashing down. The hospital needs answers she's spent over a year hiding. The doctors demand a name she swore never to speak again. And when she finally makes that call, when Marco DeLuca's voice cuts through the static like a blade, Evelyn realizes the most dangerous truth of all. You can run from a man like Marco, but you can never truly leave him behind. If you want to know how far a mother will go to save her child, and what happens when the past refuses to stay buried, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets that October night, turning Beacon Street into a river of reflected neon and brake lights. Evelyn Carter stood at her apartment window, her 6-month-old son sleeping peacefully in the nursery behind her, and allowed herself a moment of something that felt almost like peace. 15 months. 15 months since she'd walked away from everything. The penthouse, overlooking the harbor, the armed drivers, the life that glittered on the surface and rotted underneath. 15 months since she'd filed the divorce papers that Marco's lawyers had contested for exactly 3 days before going silent. The silence had been the most terrifying part. Marco DeLuca didn't surrender. He negotiated, he maneuvered, he won, but he never simply let go. Yet the papers had been signed, the settlement finalized, and Evelyn had disappeared into the kind of anonymity that Boston offered to those willing to live quietly. A modest apartment in Brighton, a job doing remote bookkeeping for small businesses, a life so unremarkable that it felt like freedom. She'd been careful, so careful. New phone number, new email, new accounts in her maiden name. She avoided the North End, the waterfront restaurants, anywhere the DeLuca family's shadow might fall. She shopped at different stores each week, never establishing a pattern. When her pregnancy began to show, she told her few acquaintances that the father was out of the picture. A brief relationship, amicable split, nothing dramatic. The lies came easier than she'd expected. Behind her, a small sound made her turn. Not quite a cry, more like a whimper. Evelyn moved through the darkened living room with the practiced efficiency of new motherhood, her bare feet silent on the worn hardwood. The nursery was painted a soft gray blue, the only room she'd bothered to properly furnish. A white crib, a rocking chair from a second-hand store, a mobile of stars and moons that turned slowly in the draft from the heating vent. Luca lay in his crib, and even in the dim glow of the nightlight, Evelyn could see something was wrong. His face was flushed, his dark hair damp with sweat. His breathing came in quick, shallow pants that didn't sound right. Evelyn's hand went to his forehead, and her heart dropped. He was burning up. "Hey, sweet boy," she whispered, scooping him up. He was limp in her arms, his usual squirming energy completely absent. "You're okay. Mama's got you." But he wasn't okay. Even as she held him, she could feel the heat radiating through his cotton sleeper. His eyes, when they fluttered open, were glassy and unfocused. She'd dealt with minor fevers before, teething, a slight cold, but this was different. This was wrong. Evelyn grabbed her phone with shaking hands and pulled up the pediatrician's after-hours line. The nurse who answered listened to her description with professional calm, asked a few questions, then delivered the verdict Evelyn had been dreading. Given his age and the severity of symptoms, you need to take him to the emergency room. Tonight. Don't wait until morning. The nearest hospital was Boston Children's, 15 minutes away on a good night. Evelyn threw on jeans and a sweater, wrapped Luca in a blanket, grabbed her purse and his diaper bag, and was out the door in less than 3 minutes. The rain had intensified, coming down so hard that her windshield wipers could barely keep up. Luca made small, frightening sounds in his car seat behind her. Not quite crying, just these awful little whimpers that cut straight through her chest. "We're almost there, baby. Almost there." Boston Children's emergency entrance glowed like a beacon through the storm. Evelyn abandoned her car in the drop-off zone, not caring about tickets or towing. A nurse met her at the door with a wheelchair, unnecessary for her, but she sank into it gratefully, Luca clutched against her chest, as another nurse wheeled them quickly through the automatic doors. What followed was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Luca was taken from her arms, she had to force herself to let go, and placed on an examination table where a young doctor in scrubs began a rapid assessment. Temperature 104.3. Heart rate elevated. Respiratory rate concerning. How long has he had the fever? The doctor asked, shining a light in Luca's eyes. I don't know. He was fine when I put him down at 7. This is the first I noticed. Any recent illnesses? Exposure to anyone sick? No, nothing. He's been healthy. Perfect. But even as she said it, Evelyn felt the crushing weight of inadequacy. She didn't know what perfect meant anymore. She didn't know what was normal, what was dangerous, what she should have seen coming. We're going to run some tests, the doctor said, already moving with practiced efficiency. Blood work, urine sample, possibly a spinal tap depending on what we find. Given his age and the fever's severity, we have to rule out serious infection. Spinal tap. The words made Evelyn's vision swim. Is he going to be okay? The doctor met her eyes with the kind of honest uncertainty that was somehow worse than false reassurance. We're going to do everything we can, but I need you to give the admissions desk some information while we work. Insurance, medical history, emergency contacts. Emergency contacts. The phrase echoed in Evelyn's mind as a nurse gently guided her to a small office off the main emergency area. Through the window, she could see the medical team surrounding Luca's small form, moving with controlled urgency. Someone was inserting an IV line. Someone else was drawing blood. Her baby was crying now, a weak, terrible sound that made her want to tear down the walls to get to him. Ms. Carter? The admissions coordinator was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a tablet computer. I know this is difficult, but I need to get some information for his chart. Evelyn forced herself to focus. Name: Luca James Carter. Date of birth: April 15th. Current address: primary care physician. Insurance information: she had basic coverage through her employer, barely adequate, but it was all she could afford. And the father? The coordinator asked. Is he here? We'll need his medical history as well. Evelyn's mouth went dry. We're not together. I understand, but for medical purposes, we need both parents' information. Family history of illnesses, genetic conditions, anything that might be relevant to treatment. I don't have that information. The coordinator's expression shifted slightly, professional sympathy mixed with practical necessity. Ms. Carter, your son is very sick. If there's any way to contact the father, even if the relationship is difficult, we need that medical background. It could be critical. Through the window, Evelyn watched a doctor prepare a syringe, watched her baby's small body arch and cry, watched nurses hold him steady for procedures she couldn't bear to think about. Can you contact him? The coordinator pressed gently. Do you have a number? Evelyn thought about the phone she'd thrown in Boston Harbor 15 months ago, the number she'd memorized but never called. The man she'd promised herself she'd never speak to again, never expose their child to, never give a chance to pull them back into his world. But Luca was crying. Her baby was sick, possibly dying, and she didn't know his father's medical history, didn't know if there was some inherited condition, some crucial piece of information that could save his life. Mrs. Carter? I can try, Evelyn heard herself say, but I don't know if he'll answer. She stepped out into the hallway, away from the coordinator's sympathetic gaze, and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely unlock the screen. She'd never deleted the number, couldn't bring herself to, like some part of her had known this moment would come. The phone rang once, twice. It was after midnight on the East Coast, later wherever Marco was these days. He wouldn't answer. This was insane. She should hang up, should tell the hospital she had no way of reaching him, should... Evelyn? His voice cut through the static and the rain and 15 months of silence. Not a question. He'd kept her number too then, had known exactly who was calling at 12:30 in the morning. For a moment she couldn't speak, couldn't form words around the knot in her throat. Evelyn? What's wrong? Not a question this time either. A statement. He knew something was wrong. Of course he did. She would never have called otherwise. She stopped, started again. I need your medical history, family history, genetic conditions, illnesses, anything like that. Silence on the other end. Not empty silence. She could hear him breathing, could almost feel the wheels turning in that sharp, calculating mind. Why? One word, flat, dangerous. Just please, Marco. I need to know if there's anything, heart conditions, immune disorders, anything that runs in your family. Evelyn. His voice dropped lower, taking on an edge that she remembered too well. You don't call me at midnight asking for my medical history without a reason. What is wrong? She closed her eyes, felt the world narrow to this moment, this choice, this line she was about to cross. I have a son, she said quietly. He's 6 months old. He's at Boston Children's Hospital right now with a fever of 104, and they need his father's medical history. The silence that followed was absolute. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the rain against the windows, could hear the muffled sounds of the emergency room behind her. When Marco spoke again, his voice had changed completely, still controlled, but with something underneath that made her stomach drop. How old? 6 months. When is his birthday? Marco, when? Isaiah, his birthday. April 15th. She heard him do the math, heard the exact moment it clicked. You were pregnant. Not a question, a realization. When you left, you were pregnant and you didn't tell me. I had my reasons. Where are you? The words came out hard and fast. Exactly where? What hospital? What floor? What room? Marco, I just need to know if there's anything the doctors should know about. Your family medical history. That's all. What hospital, Evelyn? She should have known better than to think she could control this. Should have known that the moment she opened this door, Marco would blow through it like a hurricane. Boston Children's, emergency department. But Marco, you don't need to... The line went dead. Evelyn stared at her phone, her heart hammering. What had she done? She'd called him for medical information, that was all. He was probably in New York, or Chicago, or overseas. It would take him hours to get here, if he even bothered coming at all. She could get the information she needed, get Luca stable, and be gone before Marco ever arrived. She was still telling herself that lie when she walked back into the admissions office. Were you able to reach him? The coordinator asked. Yes, he said. Evelyn scrambled for something plausible. He said there's nothing significant, no genetic conditions or inherited illnesses that he knows of. It was probably even true. Marco was healthy as a horse, and his family, well, they didn't die of natural causes, generally speaking. All right, thank you for trying. The coordinator made a note on her tablet. The doctors are still running tests. You can wait in the family room down the hall. Someone will come get you as soon as we know more. The family room was a small space with uncomfortable chairs, outdated magazines, and a television playing the news on mute. Evelyn sank into a corner seat, her wet clothes starting to make her shiver. Through the doorway, she could see the emergency department's organized chaos, doctors and nurses moving between curtained bays, machines beeping, overhead pages calling codes and consultations. Somewhere in that controlled chaos was Luca, her baby. The child she'd kept secret for 15 months, hidden like a treasure she couldn't bear to share. She'd told herself it was for his safety, that Marco's world was too dangerous, too violent, too toxic for an innocent child, that she was protecting Luca from the darkness that had nearly consumed her. But sitting here now, listening to doctors discuss meningitis and sepsis and invasive procedures, Evelyn wondered if she'd been protecting Luca at all, or just protecting herself from having to face the man she'd run from. Time moved strangely in the emergency room. Minutes stretched like hours. Evelyn watched the clock on the wall tick past 1 a.m., then 1:30. A doctor came to update her. They were admitting Luca for observation, starting broad-spectrum antibiotics while they waited for test results. The fever was coming down slightly, which was good, but they wouldn't know more until morning. Can I see him? Evelyn asked. Once we get him settled upstairs, someone will come get you. Evelyn nodded numbly. Upstairs. A hospital room, her 6-month-old baby hooked up to IV lines and monitors, fighting an infection they couldn't even identify yet. She should call someone. Her mother maybe, though they'd been estranged since the divorce. A friend. But she'd let most of those relationships fade, too tangled up with her old life. Her boss, at least, to say she wouldn't be in tomorrow. Or the next day. Or however long this took. She was scrolling through her contacts when the emergency department's automatic doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Evelyn looked up, and there, dripping rain on the hospital's linoleum floor, stood Marco DeLuca. He looked exactly the same and completely different. Same sharp features, same dark eyes that missed nothing, same perfectly tailored suit, black, expensive, somehow still immaculate despite the storm. But there was something in his face that she'd never seen before, something raw and barely contained. Their eyes met across the emergency department. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Marco was walking toward her with long, purposeful strides that made people instinctively step aside. A nurse started to intercept him. Visitors weren't supposed to just walk in like they owned the place. But something in Marco's expression made her hesitate. He stopped 3 feet from where Evelyn stood, and she realized she'd risen from her chair without meaning to. Some old instinct, some muscle memory of not wanting to be at a disadvantage. "Where is he?" Marco's voice was carefully, dangerously controlled. "They're moving him upstairs, to a room." "What floor?" "I don't know yet. They said someone would come get me." Marco pulled out his phone, pressed a single button, waited. Someone answered on the first ring. "I need a patient room number, Boston Children's Hospital, Luca Carter. Admitted tonight." A pause. "I don't care what the privacy laws say. I want the room number in the next 60 seconds. Or I want the hospital administrator's direct line. Your choice." He hung up, looked at Evelyn with eyes that saw everything. Her wet hair, her cheap clothes, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of months of struggling alone. "You look terrible," he said. "I've had a difficult night." "So have I. I was in Tokyo. You know how long it takes to fly from Tokyo to Boston?" "Marco, 13 hours. On a commercial flight. Except I didn't have 13 hours, so I chartered a jet out of Haneda and landed at Logan 45 minutes ago. Broke several air traffic regulations. The FAA will probably fine me. I don't care." He stepped closer. "You called me at midnight to tell me I have a son who's dying in a hospital, and you thought I would, what? Send medical records by email? He's not dying. You don't know that." The words came out harsh, cutting through her deflection. "You called me because you're terrified, because whatever is wrong with him is bad enough that you broke 15 months of silence. So don't stand there and tell me he's fine." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "The doctors are running tests. They've started antibiotics. His fever is coming down." "What do they think it is?" "They don't know yet. Some kind of infection. They mentioned meningitis, sepsis. They're ruling things out." She watched Marco's jaw tighten. Watched him process the words with the same razor focus he brought to everything. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but somehow more intense. "Show me where they took him." "Marco, we have to wait for—" "I'm not waiting." He pulled out his phone again. It buzzed before he could dial. He read the message, then looked at her. "4th floor, pediatric intensive care, room 412. Let's go." He started toward the elevators. Evelyn had to make a choice, stand here arguing or follow him. She followed. They rode up in silence. The elevator was too small, too close. Evelyn kept her eyes on the floor numbers lighting up one by one, acutely aware of Marco beside her. He smelled like rain and expensive cologne and something underneath that was just him, a scent memory that 15 months hadn't erased. "You cut your hair," he said suddenly. Evelyn's hand went reflexively to her shoulder-length bob. It had been waist-length when they were married. "It's easier this way." "You look different. Older." "I am older. So are you." "Not older." He was still studying her profile. "Harder. Like you've been fighting something." "Like you," she wanted to say. "I've been fighting you. Fighting every instinct that says to stop running, to go back, to believe that this time might be different." The elevator doors opened. The 4th floor was quieter than the emergency department, with dimmed lights and the soft beep of monitors from open doorways. A nurse's station sat at the center, staffed by 2 women who looked up as Marco and Evelyn approached. "We're here for Luca Carter," Marco said. "Room 412. One of the nurses checked her computer. "Are you family?" I'm his mother, Evelyn said quickly. The nurse's eyes shifted to Marco. And you are? His father. The nurse's expression flickered with something, surprise maybe, or confusion. Evelyn realized how they must look. She in her rumpled jeans and secondhand sweater. Marco in his $1,000 suit, no wedding rings, no visible connection except the child they were here to see. The baby's last name is Carter, the nurse said carefully. You are? Marco DeLuca. He said it like that should explain everything. In certain circles it did. The nurse clearly recognized the name. Evelyn watched her posture shift slightly, that subtle recalibration that happened when people realized exactly who they were dealing with. Mr. DeLuca, I'll need to verify. Call the hospital administrator if you need verification. Call your supervisor. Call whoever you need to call. But I'm seeing my son. Now. There was no threat in his voice. Didn't need to be. The sheer force of will was enough. The nurse made a quick call, had a hushed conversation, hung up, and gestured down the hallway. Room 412. The doctor should be in shortly. Marco didn't thank her. He just started walking, and Evelyn followed in his wake, watching the nurses watch him go, wondering what they thought, wondering what story they were constructing about the father who'd appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the night, commanding the hospital like he owned it. Room 412 was at the end of the hall. Through the partially open door, Evelyn could see the soft glow of monitors, hear the quiet beeping that had become the soundtrack to her nightmare. Marco pushed the door open and stopped. Evelyn came up beside him, looked at what he was seeing. Luca lay in a hospital crib that looked enormous around his small body. IV lines ran into his tiny arm, secured with medical tape. Monitors tracked his heart rate, his oxygen levels, his temperature. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady but too fast. His dark hair, Marco's hair, was damp against his forehead. Marco didn't move, didn't speak, just stood in the doorway staring at the child he hadn't known existed until an hour ago. Evelyn watched his face, trying to read the emotions moving beneath that carefully controlled surface. Shock, anger, something that might have been wonder, quickly suppressed. He looks like you, she said quietly. Marco's hands had curled into fists at his sides. How long were you going to keep this from me? As long as I could. Why? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Because I know what your life is, Evelyn said. I lived it. I know what happens to people in your world, what happened to your uncle's children, your cousin's wife, everyone who gets close enough to be used as leverage. So you thought hiding him was safer? Yes. You were wrong. Marco finally moved, walking slowly toward the crib. Look at him, Evelyn. Look where we are. You tried to protect him by keeping him from me, and where did that get you? Alone in an emergency room at midnight, so terrified you had to call the one person you swore you'd never speak to again. He reached the crib, looked down at Luca with an expression Evelyn couldn't read. You should have told me. If I had, what would you have done? Demanded custody. Turned him into another piece of your empire. Raised him to be what you are. Marco turned to face her. I would have protected him, the way I'm going to protect him now. He doesn't need your protection. He needs medicine, rest, time to heal. He needs both. Marco pulled out his phone again. And he's going to get the best care available. I'm having a specialist flown in from Johns Hopkins. Pediatric infectious disease, one of the top 3 in the country. She'll be here by morning. Marco, the doctors here are I don't care if they're perfectly adequate. I want the best. I want someone who treats children of heads of state. I want second opinions and third opinions and every test they can run. I want to know exactly what's wrong with him and exactly how to fix it. He made a call, started speaking in rapid Italian to someone who was clearly used to middle-of-the-night demands. Evelyn listened to him arrange consultations, demand access to specialists, throw money at the problem the way he always had. When he hung up, she said quietly, "Money can't fix everything." No, but it can buy time, options, the difference between adequate care and exceptional care. And I'm going to make sure my son gets exceptional. Our son. Marco's eyes locked on hers. Say that again. He's our son, not just yours. Mine too. I've been raising him alone for 6 months, feeding him, changing him, getting up with him every night. You don't get to just swoop in and take over. Watch me. This is exactly why I didn't tell you. This right here. You think you can control everything, own everything, bend the world to your will. But he's not a business deal, Marco. He's a child. Our child. And he needs more than your money and your power. He needs... What? Marco stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Love? Stability? A normal life? That's what you were giving him? Living in some apartment in Brighton, working some dead-end job, struggling to make ends meet while you lied to everyone about where he came from? I was keeping him safe. From me. His father. You were keeping him safe from me. Marco gestured to the hospital crib. How's that working out? The words hit like a slap. Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes, forced them back through sheer will. Don't, she said. Don't you dare use this against me. He's sick. Children get sick. It has everything to do with it. Marco moved to the crib again, looking down at Luca with something fierce and possessive in his expression. If I had known about him, he would have had the best pediatrician in Boston, private care, regular checkups. At the first sign of illness, we would have had a doctor at the house within the hour. He would never have gotten to the point where you're rushing him to an emergency room in the middle of the night, terrified and alone. You can't know that. I know that I take care of what's mine. And he's mine, Evelyn. You can hate that all you want, but it's true. He's my son, and that means he gets protected, not hidden away like some secret you're ashamed of. I'm not ashamed. Then why didn't you tell me? Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it. How could she explain the terror that had gripped her when she'd seen those 2 lines on the pregnancy test? The absolute certainty that if Marco knew, he would never let her go. That the child growing inside her would become a chain binding her to a life she couldn't survive. She'd left Marco because she was dying. Not physically, though that had been a possibility, given the attempts on her life, the enemies circling, the violence that followed him like a shadow, but dying inside, becoming smaller and quieter and more afraid every day. Losing pieces of herself until she couldn't remember who she'd been before him. The pregnancy had been the final push. She couldn't raise a child in that world. Couldn't watch her baby grow up surrounded by bodyguards and bulletproof glass, and the constant awareness that someone, somewhere, might use them to get to their father. So she'd run, and she'd lied, and she'd built a life that was small and quiet and safe, until tonight, when safe had revealed itself as an illusion. I was trying to give him something better, she said finally. A normal childhood, friends and school and summer camp, not bodyguards and private tutors, and learning to sleep through gunfire. There hasn't been gunfire near any of my properties in 3 years. That you know of. That I know of, Marco agreed. Which is the point. I know what's happening. I control the variables. I eliminate threats before they materialize. That's what protection means, Evelyn. Not ignorance. Not hiding and hoping no one finds you, but actually dealing with the danger. By becoming the danger. If necessary. A nurse came in then, breaking the tension. She checked Luca's vitals, adjusted his IV, made notes on a tablet. If she noticed the charged atmosphere between Marco and Evelyn, she didn't show it. How is he? Evelyn asked. Holding steady. Temperature's down to 102, which is good progress. Dr. Williams will be by in the morning to discuss next steps, but for now, we just need to let the antibiotics work. The nurse smiled at Luca. He's a strong little guy. Got good lungs. We heard him earlier. When she left, Evelyn moved to the crib, reached in carefully, avoiding the IV line, and brushed her fingers across Luca's forehead. Still warm, but not burning the way he had been. His eyes moved beneath closed lids, dreaming, maybe. She wondered what 6-month-olds dreamed about. You need to leave, she said quietly, not looking at Marco. Not happening. This isn't your place. You have no legal right. I have every legal right. He's my son. Prove it. Marco was silent for a long moment. When Evelyn finally looked at him, his expression was unreadable. You want a paternity test. It's standard procedure, for insurance purposes. Medical decisions. The hospital will require, fine, we'll do a test. Tonight if possible. And when it comes back positive, Evelyn, We're going to have a very different conversation. He pulled out his phone again, made another call. Evelyn listened to him demand a genetic test, immediate results, top priority. Heard him drop names and numbers that made things happen. When he hung up, she said, "What conversation?" "The one about custody, visitation, my son's future." "He has a future. With me. He has a future with both of us. Or did you think I would just walk away? Send a check every month and pretend he doesn't exist?" "I thought—" Evelyn stopped. She didn't know what she'd thought, that the phone call would be enough, that Marco would give her the medical information and let her fade back into obscurity, that somehow, impossibly, she could control this situation. But you couldn't control Marco DeLuca. She'd learned that the hard way. "I'll fight you," she said. "If you try to take him from me, I'll fight you with everything I have." "Good." Marco's smile was sharp and humorless. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't. But understand something, Evelyn. This isn't about you and me. This isn't about our failed marriage or your dramatic exit or the 15 months of silence. This is about him." He gestured to the crib. "My son, who I didn't know existed until tonight, who's lying in a hospital bed because the world is dangerous and you thought you could face it alone." "I wasn't alone. I had—" "Who? Who did you have? Who was there when he was born? Who helped you through the sleepless nights and the crying and all the things that terrify new parents?" Evelyn's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought," Marco said. "You were alone, because you chose to be alone rather than let me help. Your help comes with strings. Everything comes with strings. At least mine keep you alive." Before Evelyn could respond, the door opened again. This time it was a doctor, young, male, carrying a tablet and a medical kit. "Mr. DeLuca, I'm Dr. Chen from the genetics lab. I understand you requested an expedited paternity test." "That's right. I'll need samples from both potential parents and the child. It's a simple cheek swab. Results will take about 4 hours using our rapid analysis." Marco submitted to the test without hesitation. Evelyn did the same, fighting the urge to tell the doctor this was unnecessary, that of course Luca was Marco's son, but the words stuck in her throat, because admitting it out loud would make it real, would open the door she'd kept locked for 15 months. Dr. Chen swabbed Luca's cheek while he slept, then sealed the samples in sterile containers. "I'll put a rush on this," he said. "You should have results by 5 a.m. When he left, Evelyn sank into the chair by Luca's crib. The adrenaline that had been sustaining her was starting to fade, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion. "You should sleep," Marco said. "I'm not leaving him." "I didn't say leave. I said sleep. There's a couch. You're dead on your feet." "I'm fine." "Evelyn." His voice softened slightly. "You're not fine. You're running on fumes and fear. You need rest." "I'll rest when he's better." Marco studied her for a moment, then shrugged out of his suit jacket. He draped it over her shoulders before she could protest, warm from his body heat, smelling like rain and that cologne she remembered. "Then at least stay warm," he said. Evelyn wanted to throw it off, wanted to reject the gesture and everything it implied. But she was cold, and the jacket was warm, and she was too tired to fight every single battle. "Thank you," she said quietly. Marco pulled over the room's other chair, industrial, uncomfortable, and settled into it with the ease of someone used to sleeping anywhere. He loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and fixed his attention on the crib between them. They sat in silence, watching their son sleep. The monitors beeped steadily. The IV dripped. Outside the window, the storm continued, rain streaming down the glass in rivulets that caught the city lights. "What's his middle name?" Marco said eventually. Evelyn hesitated. "James, after my father." "Oh, Luca James Carter." "Yes. It should be DeLuca." "He's not a DeLuca." "He will be." Marco's tone left no room for argument. "Whether you marry me again or not, and we'll discuss that too, he's taking my name. I won't have my son going through life as someone else's." "That's not your decision to make. Everything about him is my decision now. Or did you think custody would go well for you? Single mother, unstable employment, no family support, living in a neighborhood with one of the highest crime rates in Boston. Brighton isn't—" It's not safe enough. Not for him. Marco leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Once he's well enough to leave the hospital, you're both moving. I have a property in Back Bay. Secure building, doorman, private entrance, 3 bedrooms, fully furnished. You'll live there. I have an apartment, which you'll keep if you want. I don't care, but you and Luca will live where I can protect you. I don't want your protection. You don't get a choice. Not anymore. You gave up the right to make unilateral decisions about my son's safety when you kept him from me for 15 months. Marco's voice hardened. And before you argue, think carefully. Think about standing in family court and explaining why you hid a child from his father, why you never put my name on the birth certificate, why you moved and changed your number and disappeared without a trace. I left you. That's not a crime. No, but parental alienation is, and that's exactly what you did. You deliberately cut me out of my child's life, denied him a father, denied me a son. So when you want to talk about rights, Evelyn, remember that yours are a lot shakier than you think. Evelyn felt cold despite the jacket around her shoulders. You would do that. Take him from me. If you force my hand, yes, but I'd rather not. Marco stood, moved to the window, looked out at the storm. I'd rather we figured out a way to do this without lawyers and judges and a custody battle that hurts everyone. I'd rather we put aside whatever anger and hurt is between us and focus on what he needs. Which is what, in your opinion? Both of us. A mother and a father, stability, security, resources, a life where he doesn't have to worry about whether we can afford his next doctor's appointment or if the heat will get shut off in winter. The heat has never... Evelyn. Marco turned from the window. Stop pretending you're fine. Stop acting like the last 15 months have been anything but a struggle. I know what you make doing remote bookkeeping. I know what rent costs in Brighton. I know you're living paycheck to paycheck, one emergency away from catastrophe. How do you know all that? His expression didn't change. How do you think? You've been watching me. The realization hit like ice water. This whole time, you knew where I was. I knew within 48 hours of when you left. Then why didn't you? Because you wanted space. You filed for divorce, you disappeared, you made it clear you didn't want to be found. So I gave you what you wanted. But I made sure you were safe, that no one from my world came looking, that you could rebuild whatever life you thought you needed. That's not protection, that's surveillance. It's both, and it's the only reason you're still alive. Marco's voice dropped. Do you have any idea how many people would use you to get to me? How valuable you'd be as leverage, even divorced? I'm not your responsibility anymore. You're the mother of my child. That makes you my responsibility forever. Evelyn wanted to argue, but she didn't have the energy. And a traitorous part of her, the part that remembered what it felt like to be protected, to be wanted, to matter that much to someone, that part was almost relieved. She hated that part. The test will be positive, she said finally. You know that. I know, but I want it official. I want documentation. I want every legal avenue covered so that when we do this, when we figure out how to raise him together, there's no ambiguity. We're not getting back together. I didn't say we were. You said we'd discuss it. We will. But that's separate from this. This is about being parents. The rest... Marco shrugged. We'll see. There's nothing to see. What we had is over. Is it? He moved closer, and Evelyn forced herself not to lean away. Because from where I'm standing, you're wearing my jacket, sitting in a hospital room with our son, and the only reason you called me is because some part of you knew I'd come, knew I'd help, knew that despite everything, I'm the person you turn to when things fall apart. I called you for medical information. You called me because you were terrified and alone, and you knew I'd drop everything, fly halfway around the world in the middle of the night, move heaven and earth to make sure our son gets the care he needs. He was too close now, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his jaw, close enough to remember what it felt like when that intensity was focused on her in other ways. Marco, she said quietly, don't. Don't what? Whatever you're thinking, don't. He smiled slightly. You don't know what I'm thinking. Yes, I do. I always do. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, something that might have been fondness or regret or some complicated mix of both. Then a soft sound from the crib broke the moment. Luca was stirring, his face scrunching up in that way that usually preceded crying. Evelyn was on her feet instantly, leaning over the crib rails. "Hey, sweet boy, Mama's here. You're okay." Luca's eyes opened, dark like Marco's, heavy-lidded with exhaustion and medication. His lower lip trembled. Evelyn wanted desperately to pick him up, to hold him, but she was afraid of disturbing the IV line. "Can I touch him?" Marco's voice came from behind her. Evelyn stepped aside, watched as Marco approached the crib slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something precious and breakable. He reached in, and his hand looked enormous next to Luca's small body. But his touch was gentle as he laid his palm against his son's chest, feeling the heartbeat, the breathing, the life. Luca looked up at the stranger with unfocused baby eyes. Didn't cry, just stared, taking in features that would one day look back at him from mirrors. "Hi," Marco said softly. "I'm your father." Evelyn felt her throat close, felt tears she'd been holding back all night threaten to spill over, because this moment right here, this was what she'd been running from. Not the danger or the violence or the criminal empire, but this, the connection, the irrevocable bond between father and son. The knowledge that she'd never be able to cut Marco out of Luca's life now, never be able to protect her child from the complications and the danger and the dark legacy that came with the DeLuca name. "He's beautiful," Marco said, not looking away from Luca. "Yes. He has your mouth, your chins. He has your eyes, your hair." "Good. He'll be devastating." Marco's hand moved carefully to touch Luca's fingers. Tiny fist curled around one large finger reflexively. "He's strong. He's a fighter. Like his mother." Evelyn didn't trust herself to speak. They stood there together, watching Luca drift back to sleep, and for just a moment the anger and the fear and the complications fell away. For just a moment, they were simply two people looking at the miracle they'd created together. Then dawn started to break outside the window, turning the rain silver, and Evelyn knew the moment was ending. Reality was coming back. Tests would be confirmed. Decisions would have to be made. The war for their son's future was just beginning. But right now, in this quiet hospital room with monitors beeping steady and reassuring, Evelyn let herself have this one moment of peace. It wouldn't last. She knew that. Nothing with Marco ever did. But she'd learned to take what she could get. The test results came back at 4:47 a.m., delivered by Dr. Chen with professional neutrality that couldn't quite hide his curiosity about the situation unfolding in room 412. Marco took the folder without opening it, dismissed the doctor with a nod, and set the papers on the table between them. "Aren't you going to look?" Evelyn asked. "I don't need to. I know what it says." "Then why did you demand the test?" "Documentation." Marco's voice was matter-of-fact. "Everything that happens from this point forward needs to be official, legal, uncontestable." He opened the folder then, scanned the results with the same focused intensity he brought to contracts and negotiations. Evelyn watched his expression shift subtly. Not surprise, but something harder. Confirmation. Proof. The kind of evidence that transformed abstract knowledge into undeniable reality. 99.98% probability of paternity, Marco read aloud. In case there was any doubt, there wasn't. No, but now it's official. He closed the folder, set it aside with deliberate care. Now we can move forward. Evelyn felt the walls closing in. What does that mean exactly? Moving forward? It means we need to talk about the future. His future. What happens when he leaves this hospital? He comes home with me, to our apartment. We go back to our life. Marco's laugh was short and humorless. That's not happening. You can't just... I can, and I will. He leaned back in the uncomfortable chair, studying her with those dark eyes that saw too much. Here's what you need to understand, Evelyn. Everything changed the moment you made that phone call, the moment I found out about him. You don't get to pretend the last 15 months were sustainable or safe or anything other than you hiding from reality. I wasn't hiding. I was protecting yourself. You were protecting yourself from having to deal with me, with our history, with the complications of co-parenting with someone like me. But you weren't protecting him. Because real protection isn't ignorance. It's not hoping no one notices you. It's dealing with threats before they materialize. Evelyn stood, needing to move, needing space. She walked to the window where rain still streaked the glass, though the storm had weakened as dawn approached. Below, Boston was waking up. Early commuters, delivery trucks, the city's endless rhythm. "You want to know why I really left?" she said quietly, not turning around. "It wasn't the danger. Not really. It was the control. The way you needed to manage every aspect of my life. Where I went, who I saw, what I wore to events. The way you made decisions without asking me, then expected me to smile and go along with it. I was keeping you safe. You were suffocating me. There's a difference." She turned to face him. "And I won't let you do that to him. I won't let you turn our son into another thing you control. He's 6 months old, Evelyn. He needs to be controlled. Fed, changed, protected from putting everything in his mouth. That's what parenting is." "You know what I mean." "I do. And you're wrong." Marco stood, closing the distance between them. "You think I want to turn him into some miniature version of me? Force him into a life he doesn't choose? I don't. But I also won't apologize for making sure he has every advantage, every protection, every resource available to him. Even if those resources come with strings? Everything comes with strings. Even your precious independence came with strings. Poverty, stress, the constant worry about making ends meet. You just preferred those strings to mine. Because they were my choice. And this is my choice." Marco's voice hardened. "I'm choosing to be his father, fully, completely, without apology. I'm choosing to give him the life he deserves, the protection he needs, the future you can't provide on your own. And if that means overriding your objections, then that's what I'll do. Over my dead body." "Don't." The single word came out sharp and cold. "Don't ever say that, not even as a figure of speech." Something in his tone made Evelyn pause. This wasn't anger. This was something deeper, something visceral. Fear, maybe, though she'd rarely seen Marco afraid of anything. "I just meant, I know what you meant, but I've seen too many dead bodies, Evelyn. I've attended too many funerals for people who thought they were untouchable. So when you talk about fighting me, about opposing me, do it without invoking death. Because that's the one thing I can't control. And it's the thing I fear most when it comes to you and him." The raw honesty in his voice disarmed her. This was the Marco she'd fallen in love with, the one who existed beneath the cold exterior, beneath the calculated control. The one who felt things deeply but showed it rarely. "I'm not trying to cut you out," she said finally. "I know he needs a father. I just need to know that you'll respect my role too, that you won't use your power and your money to make me irrelevant. You're his mother. You'll never be irrelevant. But will you respect my decisions, my boundaries? Or will you override me every time we disagree?" Marco considered this. "I can't promise we won't fight. We will. We always did. But I can promise that when it comes to him, I'll listen. I'll consider your perspective, and I'll only override you when I believe you're wrong in a way that puts him at risk. And who decides what constitutes risk? We both do. Through conversation, compromise, and probably some arguments along the way." He moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "I'm not trying to erase you, Evelyn. I'm trying to protect what's mine. And like it or not, you're both mine. You became mine the moment you married me, and him, he was mine from conception, even if I didn't know it. People aren't possessions. No, they're responsibilities. And I take my responsibilities seriously." Before Evelyn could respond, the door opened and a new doctor entered. An older woman with steel gray hair and an air of calm competence. She introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Williams, the pediatric infectious disease specialist Marco had flown in from Johns Hopkins. "I've reviewed Luca's case," she said, moving to check the monitors. "The good news is that his fever is responding well to the antibiotics. His blood work shows signs of bacterial infection, but nothing indicating meningitis or sepsis, which were the major concerns." Evelyn felt her knees go weak with relief. "So he's going to be okay?" With continued treatment and monitoring, yes. I'd like to keep him here another 48 hours to make sure the antibiotics are working and the fever doesn't spike again. But barring any complications, he should make a full recovery. What kind of infection is it? Marco asked. Most likely a urinary tract infection that escalated quickly. Not uncommon in infants, though it requires aggressive treatment. We'll continue the IV antibiotics for another day, then transition to oral medication that he can take at home. Dr. Williams spent the next 20 minutes going over the treatment plan, answering questions, examining Luca with gentle thoroughness. When she left, promising to check back in a few hours, Evelyn sank into her chair with something that felt almost like hope. "He's going to be okay," she whispered. "I told you he was a fighter." Marco was watching Luca with an expression Evelyn couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe. Or wonder. Or the overwhelming responsibility of suddenly having something to lose. A nurse brought breakfast, terrible hospital coffee, and slightly better pastries. Evelyn couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten, realized it had been sometime yesterday afternoon. She accepted the coffee gratefully, let the caffeine and sugar start to restore some clarity. Marco made more calls. Always more calls. Evelyn listened to him arrange things with the efficiency of someone used to commanding resources. A car service to retrieve Evelyn's vehicle from the emergency entrance. Someone to go to her apartment and pack bags for her and Luca. Instructions to his property manager about preparing the Back Bay residence. "I didn't agree to move," Evelyn said when he hung up. "You didn't disagree either." "That's not consent." "Evelyn," Marco set down his phone. "Be practical for a moment. You're exhausted. Your son is in the hospital. You can't go back to work for at least a few days. Your apartment is 30 minutes from here. The Back Bay property is 10 minutes. It has a nursery already set up. I had it done months ago." "Months ago? You've been planning this." "I've been preparing for possibilities. That's different." "You set up a nursery in a property I didn't know about for a child you didn't know existed?" "I set up a nursery in a property I own because I hoped that someday you might—" He stopped, started again. "I didn't know about him specifically, but I knew that if you ever came back, if we ever tried again, I wanted to be ready." The confession hung between them, unexpected and raw. "I'm not coming back," Evelyn said quietly. "So you keep saying, but you're here. And when he's discharged, you'll need somewhere safe and convenient to recover. Somewhere with resources and support. That's all I'm offering. Not a reconciliation, not a resumption of our marriage, just a practical solution to an immediate problem. And when the immediate problem is solved, then we figure out the next step. Together." Evelyn wanted to argue, but she was too tired. And he was right about the practical aspects, damn him. The apartment in Brighton was small, up 3 flights of stairs, with neighbors who worked nights and wouldn't appreciate a crying baby. The Back Bay property, wherever it was, would have better security, better resources, better everything. "1 week," she said. "We stay for 1 week while Luca recovers. Then we discuss long-term arrangements." 2 weeks, and I want to spend time with him. Real time. Not supervised visits, not scheduled appointments. I want to learn how to take care of him." "You don't know anything about babies." "Then teach me. You had to learn once too." The idea of Marco, controlled, precise, commanding Marco, learning to change diapers and warm bottles was almost absurd, but the sincerity in his expression was real. "Fine," Evelyn said. 2 weeks. But I'm still his primary caregiver. You don't make decisions about his routine or his care without consulting me first." "Agreed. As long as you extend me the same courtesy." They shook on it, a formal gesture that felt strange and necessary. The first negotiation in what Evelyn suspected would be a long series of compromises. The day passed in the strange, suspended time of hospitals. Nurses came and went. Doctors checked vitals. Luca slept and woke and fussed and slept again. The fever continued to drop. 102, then 101, then finally settling at 99.8. The antibiotics were working. Marco left once mid-afternoon, returning 2 hours later with fresh clothes for both of them and bags of takeout from a restaurant Evelyn recognized as expensive and Italian. They ate in relative silence, too exhausted for conversation, while Luca dozed in his crib. "You should sleep," Marco said when the food was gone. "I'll watch him." "I'm fine." Evelyn, you've been awake for over 30 hours. Sleep, I'll wake you if anything changes. She wanted to refuse, but her body was screaming for rest. The chair had become unbearable, her back aching from hours of uncomfortable positions. The couch, Marco said, gesturing to the small sofa against the wall. It's not great, but it's better than the chair. Evelyn moved to the couch, still wearing Marco's suit jacket because she'd grown used to its weight. She meant to just rest her eyes for a few minutes, just close them for a moment. She woke to the sound of Marco's voice, low and gentle, speaking Italian. It took her a moment to orient herself. Dim room, evening light through the windows, the steady beep of monitors. She'd been asleep for hours. Marco stood at the crib, holding Luca carefully against his chest. The baby was awake, looking up at his father with serious dark eyes, while Marco spoke softly in the language of his childhood. Evelyn couldn't make out all the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Stories, maybe. Or promises. The kind of things fathers tell their sons when they think no one is listening. You're good at that, she said quietly. Marco turned, not startled. He'd probably known she was awake. He likes the sound of it. Italian. Calms him down when he fusses. Have you been holding him this whole time? He woke up crying about an hour ago. I changed him, fed him the bottle the nurse brought, walked him around until he settled. Marco looked down at Luca with something soft in his expression. He's heavier than he looks. 7 months of growth will do that. He's perfect. Not a question, a statement of fact. I don't understand how you created something this perfect, but you did. We did, Evelyn corrected. We did, Marco agreed. Evelyn stood, stretched muscles stiff from hours on the hospital couch. Her phone showed it was nearly 7 p.m. A full day had passed since the nightmare began, a day that had changed everything. Doctor. Williams came by while you were asleep, Marco said. Luca's temperature has been normal for 6 hours. If it stays stable overnight, we can take him home tomorrow. Home. The word felt loaded with meaning. Where was home now? The Brighton apartment she'd worked so hard to make safe? Or the Back Bay property Marco had prepared for a future he'd hoped for? Okay, she said. Tomorrow. That night they took turns sleeping. Marco insisted Evelyn take the first shift, and she was too exhausted to argue. She woke at midnight to find him in the chair by the crib, reading something on his phone while Luca slept peacefully. They switched positions without speaking, falling into a rhythm that felt almost natural. Dr. Williams came by early the next morning, checked Luca thoroughly, and gave them discharge instructions. Continue the oral antibiotics for 10 days. Watch for any return of fever. Follow up with the pediatrician in 1 week. Signs to watch for that would require immediate emergency care. He should be back to normal within a few days, she said. But take it easy. No big outings, nothing that might stress his system while he's recovering. Understood, Marco said. Thank you for coming. Of course. He's a lucky little boy, Dr. Williams smiled at Evelyn. Both parents here, both clearly devoted. That matters more than people realize. When the formal discharge paperwork was complete, a nurse brought a wheelchair for Evelyn. Hospital policy, even though she was perfectly capable of walking. Marco carried Luca, the baby looking tiny and fragile against his father's chest. They made an odd procession through the hospital corridors, drawing looks from staff and other visitors. A black SUV waited at the entrance, and Evelyn recognized the driver, one of Marco's security team, a man named Vincent, who'd been with the family for years. He opened the rear door without comment, his expression neutral as Marco helped Evelyn inside. The car seat, she said suddenly. I don't have already installed. Marco gestured to the rear-facing infant seat secured in the middle position. Top of the line, the kind that cost more than Evelyn's monthly rent. Of course. He buckled Luca in with surprising competence. He'd clearly researched how to do it properly. The baby fussed briefly, then settled as the car began to move. They drove through Boston streets still wet from recent rain, heading away from Brighton and toward Back Bay. Evelyn watched the neighborhoods change, becoming progressively more upscale. Brick townhouses gave way to elegant high-rises. Street parking gave way to private garages. The SUV turned onto a tree-lined street of historic brownstones, pulled up in front of a building that screamed old money and careful preservation. A doorman in a proper uniform opened the vehicle door. "Welcome home, Mr. DeLuca." "Ma'am." Marco lifted Luca's carrier out carefully while Evelyn climbed out, staring up at the building. This wasn't just upscale, this was generational wealth, the kind of address that appeared in society pages. "This is where you want us to stay?" she asked. "Third floor, private entrance. I own the whole building, so the other residences are empty. Complete privacy." "You own the entire building?" "I own several buildings. This one has the best security setup." Marco gestured toward the entrance. "Come on, let me show you." The lobby was all marble and brass, beautifully maintained Art Deco design. They took an elevator with actual brass gates to the third floor, where Marco used a key card to unlock a heavy wooden door. The apartment beyond was stunning. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, crown molding that spoke of craftsmen long dead. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the street, filtered through sheer curtains that provided privacy without blocking light. The furniture was expensive but understated, comfortable rather than showy. "The nursery is this way," Marco said, leading her down a hallway. The room he showed her made Evelyn's throat tight. It was painted the same soft gray blue as Luca's room in Brighton, but everything else was different. A crib that looked like furniture rather than something assembled from a box. A changing table with custom storage. A rocking chair upholstered in buttery leather that probably cost more than her car. Shelves already stocked with books and toys, appropriate for different developmental stages. "When did you do all this?" she asked. "I had it designed about 8 months ago, executed 6 months ago, updated monthly based on age-appropriate needs." Marco set Luca's carrier down gently. "I told you, I was preparing for possibilities." "Possibilities that I'd come back pregnant?" "Possibilities that you'd come back. That we'd try again. That maybe this time I could do it right." He looked at her with unusual openness. "I never stopped hoping, Evelyn. Even after the divorce was final, even after months of silence, some part of me kept hoping you'd realize that what we had was worth fighting for. What we had was toxic. Parts of it were. Parts of it were also the best thing that ever happened to me." Marco moved to the window, looking out at the street below. "I know I made mistakes. I know I was controlling and paranoid and impossible to live with sometimes, but I also know that what we had, the connection, the intensity, the way we fit together, that doesn't come around twice. It doesn't matter if it comes around at all if it destroys you in the process." "Does this look destroyed to you?" Marco gestured around the nursery. "I built something while you were gone. Not just this room, but something inside myself. I worked on being better, being the kind of man who could be a good father, even if I never got the chance to be a good husband again." Evelyn sat in the expensive rocking chair, felt it move smoothly beneath her weight. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want to try, not to go back to what we were, but to build something new, something that works for all three of us." Marco turned from the window. "I'm saying that I love you, Evelyn. I never stopped, and I think you never stopped loving me either, even though you wanted to. Love isn't enough. No, but it's a start, and we have something else now, too. Him." Marco looked at Luca, sleeping peacefully in his carrier. He deserves parents who at least try to make it work, who put aside their pride and their history and their hurt and try to build something better. "I can't go back to being suffocated. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to stay here for 2 weeks. Let me prove that I can respect your boundaries. Let me learn how to be his father. Let me show you that I've changed." Marco's voice dropped lower. "And if at the end of 2 weeks you still want to leave, I'll help you find a safe place. I'll set up a custody arrangement that works for both of us. I'll step back and let you have the space you need. But give me the 2 weeks first." Evelyn looked at him. This man who'd flown across the world at midnight, who'd bullied hospitals and flown in specialists, who'd prepared a nursery for a child he hadn't known existed. This man who'd broken her heart and her spirit, but who'd also loved her with an intensity that terrified her. 2 weeks, she said finally. "But separate bedrooms. And you follow my lead when it comes to Luca. You're learning, which means I'm teaching. Those are my terms." "Accepted." Marco moved toward the door. "I'll show you your room. It's next to the nursery. I thought you'd want to be close. Her room was lovely and impersonal, decorated in neutral tones, with another comfortable chair and a door that locked from the inside. Evelyn noted that detail with relief. She needed to know she could retreat, could close herself away if things became too intense. "Where do you sleep?" she asked. "Master bedroom, other end of the hallway. Far enough for privacy, close enough to help if you need it." Marco checked his watch. "It's almost noon. You should eat something. Rest. I'll watch him for a few hours." "You need sleep too." "I'll sleep when you're rested. We'll trade off like we did at the hospital." It was so reasonable, so practical. But Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to something far more complicated than a temporary living arrangement, that these 2 weeks would be a test she wasn't sure either of them could pass. That night, after Luca had been fed and changed and rocked to sleep, after Evelyn had showered and eaten and tried to wrap her mind around her new reality, she stood in the nursery watching her son sleep. The monitors Marco had installed showed his breathing, his heart rate, his temperature, all steady and normal. She heard footsteps in the hallway, turned to find Marco in the doorway. "He's okay," she said. "I know. I checked the monitors." "Of course you did." Marco smiled slightly. "Old habits. Can't help watching, making sure everything's secure." They stood together in the dim nursery light, watching the steady rise and fall of Luca's chest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Learning to coexist, establishing routines, navigating the complicated territory between divorced parents, and something that might be more. But tonight, they had this: a sleeping child, a quiet moment, and the fragile beginning of something that might, possibly, be called peace. "Thank you," Evelyn said quietly, "for coming, for the specialist, for all of it." "You don't need to thank me. He's my son." "Still, thank you." Marco nodded, then moved toward the door. Stopped. Looked back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Get some rest, Evelyn. Tomorrow, we start figuring out how to do this." He left her there, and Evelyn sank into the expensive rocking chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she still was. How much had changed in 48 hours. How the future she'd carefully constructed had been blown apart by one phone call, one sick baby, one man who refused to let go. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But another part, the part she'd been trying to suppress for 15 months, that part felt something that might have been relief. Or hope. Or the dangerous possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to make this work. Luca stirred in his sleep, made a small sound, settled again. Evelyn reached into the crib, touched his soft hair, felt the warmth of his skin. Normal temperature, healthy sleep. Her baby, safe and healing. Outside, Boston hummed with late-night traffic. Inside, in this carefully prepared sanctuary, Evelyn allowed herself to breathe, to rest, to believe for just this moment that maybe the call she'd sworn never to make had been the right one after all. Tomorrow would bring complications. But tonight, they had survived. And sometimes, survival was enough. The first week passed in a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Evelyn woke each morning to find Marco already awake, standing by Luca's crib with coffee in hand, watching their son sleep with an intensity that would have been unsettling if it weren't so clearly protective. They moved around each other carefully, establishing routines and boundaries, learning the choreography of shared parenting. Marco proved surprisingly adept at the practical aspects of infant care. He learned to warm bottles to the exact right temperature, to change diapers with efficient precision, to recognize the different types of cries that meant hungry versus tired versus uncomfortable. He approached fatherhood the way he approached everything else, with complete focus and a determination to master every detail. "You're thinking too hard about it," Evelyn said one afternoon, watching him pace the living room with Luca fussing against his shoulder. "Just relax. He can feel your tension." "I am relaxed." "You're walking like you're defusing a bomb." Marco stopped, looked down at Luca's scrunched-up face. "What am I doing wrong?" "Nothing. You're just trying to control something that can't be controlled. Sometimes babies cry. You can't always fix it." The frustration in Marco's expression was almost comical. Here was a man who commanded criminal empires, who negotiated with cartels and politicians, who bent the world to his will through sheer force of personality. And a 6-month-old baby was defeating him. "Here," Evelyn said, taking Luca from him. She shifted the baby to her other shoulder, swayed slightly, hummed something tuneless. Luca's crying quieted to fussy whimpers, then stopped altogether. "See? Sometimes it's not about fixing. It's about being present." "You make it look easy." "It's not. I've just had more practice." She looked at Marco, saw the exhaustion in his eyes. "And I've learned to let go of the need to control everything. You should try it sometime." "Letting go isn't really my strength." I noticed. But despite the friction, despite the moments of tension, they were making it work. Luca thrived in the comfortable apartment, his fever long gone, his energy returning. He laughed more, reached for toys, rolled across the expensive rug while Marco watched like a hawk, ready to catch him if he got too close to furniture edges. On the 8th day, everything changed. Evelyn was in the kitchen making lunch when Marco's phone rang. She heard him answer in the living room, his voice dropping to the low, clipped tone he used for business. She'd learned not to ask about those calls. Some things from his world she was better off not knowing. But when he appeared in the kitchen doorway 10 minutes later, his expression made her stomach drop. "We need to talk," he said. "That's never good." "Evelyn, I'm serious." She set down the knife she'd been using to cut vegetables, wiped her hands on a towel. "What's wrong?" Marco glanced toward the living room where Luca was napping in his portable crib. "Not here. Your room." They moved down the hallway, closed the door behind them. Marco stood at the window, looking out at the street below with the kind of focus that meant he was processing something significant. "There's been a development," he said finally. "My head of security picked up unusual surveillance activity near the building. 3 separate occasions over the past 4 days. Different vehicles, different operators, but coordinated. Professional." Evelyn felt cold spread through her chest. "What kind of surveillance?" "The kind that maps routines. Times we come and go. Security patterns, vulnerabilities." Marco turned from the window. "Someone knows about Luca. Someone knows he's here and they're gathering information." "How?" "We've barely left the apartment. I haven't told anyone where we are." "You didn't need to. The hospital records would have been enough. My name on the paternity test. The specialist I flew in. Too many people saw us, saw him. It only takes one person with the right connections to put the pieces together." "Who would care? You've been divorced for over a year. I'm nobody." "You're the mother of my son. That makes you very much somebody." Marco's voice was grim. "And Luca makes you the most valuable leverage anyone could want against me." The reality of what he was saying hit her like ice water. She'd known, abstractly, that Marco's world was dangerous, but she'd convinced herself that staying hidden, staying small, would keep them safe. That if no one knew Luca existed, they'd be untouchable. "What do we do?" she asked. "We prepare. I'm increasing security around the building. No one in or out without facial recognition clearance. Armed teams on rotation. Vincent will coordinate movements if we need to go anywhere." "Marco, that's insane. We can't live like we're under siege." "We're not under siege. We're being cautious." "Cautious is locking the doors. This is paranoia. This is reality." Marco moved closer, his expression intense. "You wanted to know why I was so controlling when we were married? This is why. Because people like me have enemies, real enemies, people who would hurt you to get to me without a second thought. And now we have him to protect too." Evelyn sank onto the edge of the bed. "I thought leaving would keep us safe from this. I thought if I stayed away from you, from your world, we'd be invisible." "There is no invisible. Not anymore. The moment I acknowledged him, the moment my name went on those hospital records, he became visible. He became mine, and that means he became a target. So what was I supposed to do? Let him die because I was too afraid to call you? No. You did exactly what you should have done. You saved his life. But you need to understand that the safety you thought you were building, it was always an illusion. The only real safety comes from dealing with the threat directly." "And how do you deal with people who want to hurt your family?" Marco's smile was cold and humorless. "Very carefully. And very permanently." The edge in his voice reminded Evelyn of exactly who she was dealing with. This wasn't just Luca's father, wasn't just the man she'd loved and left. This was Marco DeLuca, head of a family that operated in shadows and violence, a man who'd built an empire on fear and precision. "I don't want that life for him," she said quietly. "I don't want him growing up knowing that his father hurts people. I don't hurt people randomly. I eliminate threats. There's a difference. Not to a child, there isn't. Then we'll make sure he never has to know the details. But Evelyn, you need to accept something. He's my son. That comes with complications. That comes with danger. Running from it won't make it go away. It'll just make you vulnerable." A sound from the living room cut through the tension, Luca waking, making the small noises that preceded crying. Evelyn stood, needing to escape this conversation, needing to hold her baby and pretend for a few more minutes that the world wasn't closing in. Marco caught her arm as she passed. "I will protect you both. Whatever it takes. You need to trust that. Trust is earned, Marco, not demanded. Then let me earn it. Let me show you that I can keep you safe." She pulled away, went to Luca, lifted him from the crib, and felt the solid weight of him against her chest. His dark eyes blinked up at her, trusting and innocent. He had no idea that his existence had painted a target on all of them. The next 3 days were tense. Security increased visibly, men in dark suits stationed in the lobby, cameras installed at every entrance, a system of codes and clearances that made simple trips to the corner store feel like military operations. Evelyn chafed against the restrictions, but Marco was immovable. "Until we identify who's watching and why, we stay careful," he said. On the 11th night, Evelyn woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. 3 a.m. Nothing good happened at 3 a.m. She grabbed it, saw an unknown number, almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept. "Hello?" Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice, digitally distorted, impossible to identify. "You should have stayed hidden, Mrs. DeLuca." The line went dead. Evelyn sat frozen, phone clutched in her hand, heart hammering. The name. They'd called her Mrs. DeLuca, even though she'd been divorced for over a year, even though she'd gone back to her maiden name. They knew who she was, what she was. She was out of bed and down the hallway before conscious thought caught up. Marco's door was closed, but not locked. She pushed it open, found him already awake, sitting in bed with his own phone, reading something on the screen. He looked up when she entered, took in her expression, was on his feet instantly. "What happened?" "Someone called. Just now. They knew my name. They called me Mrs. DeLuca." "What did they say?" "That I should have stayed hidden." Evelyn's voice shook despite her effort to control it. "Marco, they know who I am, where I am. They probably know about Luca." Marco took her phone, checked the number, made a call, spoke rapidly to whoever answered, his security team probably. Issued instructions about tracing the call, checking the building systems, increasing the perimeter watch. When he hung up, he guided Evelyn to sit on the edge of his bed. "It's going to be okay." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do, because I'm not going to let anything happen to either of you." Marco crouched in front of her, forced her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. This is intimidation. They're trying to scare you, make you panic, maybe make you run. That's when people get hurt, when they act out of fear instead of strategy. What do? We don't panic. We don't run. We stay put while I figure out who's behind this and what they want. And if what they want is to hurt Luca, then they'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, Evelyn, that's not a fight they'll win." The absolute certainty in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it terrified her, because she knew what Marco was capable of when pushed. She'd seen the aftermath of his decisions, the people who disappeared or ended up in hospitals or simply stopped being problems. "I can't let you kill people to protect us," she said. "I'll do whatever is necessary. Even if it means becoming exactly what I left you for?" Marco stood, moved to the window, looked out at the street below. "You left me because you were afraid. Afraid of my world, afraid of what it would turn you into, afraid of losing yourself. I get that. I even respect it. But you're not alone anymore. You have a child who needs protecting, and in my world, protection isn't gentle. It's not soft. It's hard decisions and harder actions, and doing whatever is necessary to keep the people you love safe. I don't want him to grow up in that world. He already is in that world. The moment he was born mine, he was in it. You can't change that. You can only decide how we deal with it. Evelyn stood, moved to the door. I need to check on him. I'll come with you. They walked together to the nursery, found Luca sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the danger circling. Marco checked the monitors, the window locks, the camera feeds. Always checking, always vigilant. You should sleep, he said. I'll watch him tonight. I won't be able to sleep. Then we'll both watch. They settled into chairs on opposite sides of the crib, keeping vigil over their son while the city slept around them. Evelyn watched Marco's profile in the dim light, saw the tension in his shoulders, the sharp focus in his eyes. He looked like a man preparing for war. Who do you think is behind this? She asked quietly. Could be several groups. The Moretti family has been pushing into territory I control. The Sinaloa cartel is unhappy about a shipment that went missing last month. There's a Russian outfit that's been making noise about expansion. Marco's voice was clinical, detached. Or it could be someone I haven't thought of yet, someone who sees an opening and wants to exploit it. And your plan is what? Wait until they make a move? My plan is to identify them before they make a move. Then eliminate the threat before it gets anywhere near you and Luca. How? Better you don't know the details. That's not how this works anymore, Marco. If we're doing this, if we're raising him together, you don't get to shut me out of the dangerous parts. Marco looked at her across the crib. You really want to know? Yes? Fine. I have people reaching out to contacts in every organization that might have reason to come after me, asking questions, applying pressure, making it clear that there will be consequences for threatening my family. Meanwhile, my security team is analyzing the surveillance footage, tracking the vehicles, building profiles on the operators. When we identify who's behind this, I'll arrange a meeting. And then? And then I'll make them understand that my son is untouchable, that coming after him is suicide, that whatever problem they have with me, it stays between us and doesn't involve civilians. And if they don't agree? Marco's smile was sharp and cold. Then I make sure they can't disagree. Permanently. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about protection. There's a difference. Not legally, there isn't. I don't care about legally. I care about keeping you both alive. Evelyn looked down at Luca, sleeping so peacefully, so innocent. I can't believe this is our life now, sitting in the dark, talking about killing people who want to hurt our baby. It doesn't have to be your life. You could leave, take him somewhere safe, somewhere far from me and my world. I'd set you up with new identities, protection, enough money to never worry. You could disappear for real this time. The offer hung between them, genuine and painful. And you'd just let us go? Evelyn asked. I'd hate every second of it, but if that's what it takes to keep you safe, yes, I'd let you go. You're lying. I'm not. I learned something while you were gone, Evelyn. I learned that loving someone means wanting what's best for them, even if it kills you, even if it means living without them. And you think running is what's best for us? I think staying might get you killed, and I can survive a lot of things, but not that. Evelyn stood, moved around the crib to where Marco sat. She crouched in front of him the way he'd done for her earlier, forced him to meet her eyes. I'm not running. Not again. Whatever is coming, we face it together. That's what you wanted, isn't it? For me to stop being afraid? For us to try to make this work? Not if it gets you hurt. Then make sure it doesn't. Do what you do, Marco. Eliminate the threat. Protect your family. Just don't shut me out of it. Don't make decisions without telling me. That's how we do this together. Something shifted in Marco's expression. Relief, maybe. Or fear. Or the terrible weight of responsibility. Okay, he said quietly. Together. The next morning brought answers. Marco's security team had traced the surveillance vehicles to a shell company connected to the Moretti family. The phone call had bounced through servers in 3 countries, but the origin point was a location in South Boston known to be Moretti territory. They're fishing, Marco explained over breakfast while Luca sat in his high chair cheerfully destroying a banana. Testing to see how I'll react, whether I'll run, hide, or come out fighting. And which will you do? None of the above. I'll arrange a meeting with Dominic Moretti, face to face, clear the air. That sounds dangerous. It's less dangerous than letting this escalate. Right now it's posturing. If I don't respond correctly, it could become something worse. What's the correct response? Strength without aggression. Making it clear that my family is off limits, but leaving room for Moretti to back down without losing face. Evelyn wiped banana off Luca's face, tried to ignore the knot of fear in her stomach. When? Tonight, neutral location. Both of us bring limited security. We talk. We reach an understanding. Everyone walks away. And if you don't reach an understanding, then it becomes more complicated, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. Marco left that afternoon to prepare. Evelyn spent the day trying to maintain normalcy, playing with Luca, reading to him, pretending her heart wasn't racing every time she heard a sound from the hallway. Vincent stayed in the apartment, a silent presence that was somehow both reassuring and terrifying. Marco returned at 8 p.m., dressed in a dark suit, looking every inch the dangerous man he was. He came to the nursery where Evelyn was putting Luca down for the night. "I'm leaving soon," he said. "I know." "If anything happens, don't say that." "If anything happens," Marco continued firmly, "Vincent has instructions. He'll get you both out of the city. There are safe houses, resources, everything you need. You'll be taken care of." "I don't want to be taken care of. I want you to come back." Marco moved to the crib, looked down at Luca, who was already drowsy, eyes fluttering closed. He touched his son's hair with careful fingers. "I will come back. I promise." Then he turned to Evelyn. "But I need to know you'll be safe while I'm gone. That you won't do anything reckless." "Like what?" "Like trying to follow me, or leaving the apartment, or making any decisions based on fear instead of strategy." "I'll stay here, with Vincent, with Luca. I'll wait for you." "Good." Marco hesitated, then moved closer. "There's something I need to say, in case things don't go the way I expect." "Marco, let me finish." He took her hands, held them firmly. "I love you. I never stopped loving you, even when you hated me, even when you left. And I love him more than I thought possible to love anything. You gave me that. You gave me a son, a family, a reason to be better than I've been. So if something happens tonight, I need you to know that. I need you to tell him someday that his father loved him from the moment he knew he existed." Evelyn felt tears burn her eyes. "You're coming back." "I'm coming back," Marco agreed. Then he kissed her forehead, gentle and brief, and left before she could say anything else. The waiting was torture. Evelyn tried to watch television, to read, to do anything that would make the time pass faster. Vincent remained in the living room, professional and alert. Luca slept peacefully, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. At 11 p.m., Evelyn's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The message was simple. An address in Charlestown and a time. Midnight. "Vincent," she called, "I need you to see this." He came immediately, read the message, his expression darkening. "This wasn't part of the plan." "What does it mean?" "It means someone wants you at that location, someone who has your number." "Could it be Marco?" "Mr. DeLuca wouldn't text from an unknown number, and he wouldn't ask you to leave the apartment." "Then who?" Another buzz. Another message. "Come alone if you want to see him again." Evelyn's blood went cold. "They have Marco." "We don't know that. This could be a trick to get you to leave safety. Or it could be real. Vincent, what if they have him? What if something went wrong?" Vincent was already on his phone, calling someone, having a rapid, tense conversation in Italian. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "Mr. DeLuca's security team lost contact with him 20 minutes ago. His phone is off. The meeting location is empty." "Then they do have him." Evelyn grabbed her jacket. "We have to go." "Absolutely not. My orders are to keep you and the baby here." "Your orders are about to change. Call whoever you need to call, but I'm not sitting here while Marco is in danger. If you leave, you're walking into a trap." "Then come with me. Bring backup. Do whatever you need to do, but I'm going to that address." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, clearly weighing orders against reality. Finally, he made another call. "We'll need to bring the baby," he said. I can't leave him here unprotected. Then bring him. Just move. They moved quickly, efficiently. Vincent called in 2 additional security personnel to meet them. Evelyn bundled Luca into his carrier, grabbed the diaper bag, tried not to think about what they might be walking into. The drive to Charlestown took 15 minutes through empty streets. The address was a warehouse near the water, dark and seemingly abandoned. Vincent's team swept the perimeter while Evelyn waited in the SUV, holding Luca, trying to keep her breathing steady. Building is clear, Vincent reported. No signs of occupancy, no vehicles, nothing. Then why did they send me here? Her phone buzzed again. Look down. Evelyn looked at her lap, confused. Then she saw it, a small red dot dancing across Luca's carrier. A laser sight. Vincent! She screamed. He reacted instantly, throwing himself across her and Luca, shouting orders. The windows of the SUV were bulletproof, Marco's security measures, but the message was clear. They could have killed Luca. They'd chosen not to. This time. The phone buzzed once more. We could have taken your son. Remember that. Tell DeLuca to back off, or next time we won't miss. Then nothing. Vincent pulled back, checked them both frantically. Are you hurt? No, we're fine. Vincent, where is Marco? I don't know, but we're getting you back to the apartment now. The drive back was tense and silent. Evelyn held Luca against her chest, feeling the rapid hammer of her own heartbeat. They'd been so close. If Vincent had been slower, if the windows hadn't been bulletproof, if the shooter had decided to follow through. Back at the apartment, Vincent positioned his team around the building. Evelyn put Luca to bed with shaking hands, then sat in the living room, waiting for news, waiting for Marco. He came through the door at 2 a.m., bloodied but alive. Evelyn was on her feet instantly. What happened? Ambush. They were waiting at the meeting location. Moretti wasn't even there. It was a setup from the start. Marco winced as he moved, holding his ribs. They wanted me distracted while they went after you. How did you know? I didn't. Not until Vincent called to say you'd left the apartment. Marco's voice was hard. You were supposed to stay here. Safe. They sent me messages, said they had you. And you believed them? You put yourself and Luca in danger because of a text message? What was I supposed to do? Let you die? Yes! If it meant keeping him safe, yes! Marco gestured toward the nursery. That's the whole point, Evelyn. I can take care of myself. You and Luca are supposed to be untouchable. We're not. They proved that tonight. They had a laser sight on him, Marco. On our baby. They could have killed him. The color drained from Marco's face. What? At the warehouse. They had us targeted. Vincent said the windows are bulletproof, but if they'd used a different weapon, if we'd gotten out of the car... Evelyn couldn't finish the sentence. Marco sank onto the couch, suddenly looking older than his years. This is my fault. I thought I could control it. Thought I could keep the violence away from you, but I can't. As long as you're connected to me, you're in danger. Then what do we do? Marco looked up at her, and Evelyn saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes. Defeat. Or something close to it. I don't know, he said quietly. For the first time in my life, I genuinely don't know. Evelyn moved to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, brought it back to Marco along with the first aid kit she'd found in the bathroom weeks ago. He took the water but waved away the kit. It's not that bad. Looks worse than it is. Let me see. Evelyn, let me see, Marco. He relented, shrugging out of his jacket and unbuttoning his shirt. The bruising across his ribs was already spectacular, purple and black spreading across pale skin. His knuckles were split, dried blood caked in the creases. There was a cut above his left eye that had stopped bleeding but would need cleaning. Evelyn cleaned the wounds in silence, her hands steady despite the fury building in her chest. This was the life he'd chosen. Violence and retaliation and endless cycles of threat and response, and now their son was caught in the middle of it. You need to see a doctor, she said. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. Wasn't meant to be. Marco caught her wrist gently as she pressed antiseptic to the cut above his eye. I'm sorry for putting you through this, for bringing this danger to you and Luca. You didn't bring it. I called you, remember? I opened this door. You called me to save our son's life. I'm the one who made him a target. He was always going to be a target. The moment he was born yours, the moment my name was Carter, and his could have been DeLuca. We were always going to end up here. Evelyn set down the antiseptic, met his eyes. The only question is what we do now. I told you, I don't know. That's not good enough. You always know. You always have a plan. 3 backup plans and a contingency for every contingency. So think, Marco, what do we do? He stood, moved to the window despite her protests about resting. Outside, the city was dark except for streetlights and the occasional passing car. Peaceful. Deceptive. There are 2 options, he said finally. I can escalate. Go after the Moretti family with everything I have. Make them bleed until they beg for mercy. Make an example so brutal that no one else even thinks about coming after my family. And the second option? I can negotiate. Offer them something they want more than revenge. Territory, money, influence. Find a way to end this without more bloodshed. Which one keeps Luca safest? That's the problem. I don't know. Escalation might end the threat permanently, but it could also trigger a war that puts you both in more danger. Negotiation might buy peace, but it could also be seen as weakness, and weakness in my world invites more attacks. Evelyn moved to stand beside him at the window. What would you have done before Luca? Escalation. Without question. Anyone who came after me would be eliminated so thoroughly that their families would forget their names. And now? Now I have something to lose. Everything to lose. Marco's voice was rough. I can't think clearly when every decision might get my son killed. I keep running scenarios and they all end badly. Then maybe we need a third option. There isn't one. There's always one. You taught me that. Evelyn turned to face him. What if we remove the variables that make this worth fighting over? What if you step back from the business, legitimize what can be legitimized, sell off what can't, become someone not worth targeting? That would take years, and the Morettis aren't going to wait years for me to slowly exit. They see an opening now. Then we give them what they want, which is you, out of the picture. Not dead, just irrelevant. Evelyn's mind was racing, pieces falling into place. What if you publicly step down? Name someone else as head of the family. Make it look like you're done, finished, no longer a threat or an asset. They'd never believe it. They would if you sold it right, if you made it seem like the pressure got to you. Like having a son made you weak, made you choose family over business. She grabbed his arm. Marco, think about it. You disappear from the game entirely. The Morettis get what they want, you out of their way. And we get what we need, safety for Luca. And where do we go while I'm supposedly stepping down? They'd still watch us, still wait for me to make a move. So we don't make a move. We actually do it. We leave. Take Luca and disappear somewhere they can't touch us. Marco stared at her like she'd suggested something impossible. You're talking about witness protection, hiding for the rest of our lives. I'm talking about being free, actually free, not looking over our shoulders, not waiting for the next attack, just us, raising our son somewhere normal. There is no normal for people like me. Then maybe it's time to stop being people like you. Maybe it's time to just be his father. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Marco turned away, ran a hand through his hair, and Evelyn could see him processing, calculating, weighing options with that sharp mind that missed nothing. It wouldn't work, he said finally. Even if I stepped down, even if I disappeared, there would always be someone who remembered, someone who wanted revenge for old grievances, someone who saw me as a threat. Unless you give them something else to focus on, someone else to fight. Evelyn moved closer. What if stepping down wasn't surrender? What if it was strategy? You choose your successor carefully, someone ambitious enough to take the attention, smart enough to redirect it. The Morettis would have a new target, a new threat to worry about, and we'd be yesterday's news. You're talking about starting a war. I'm talking about survival. For our son. Marco looked at her with something like admiration. When did you get so ruthless? I learned from the best, and I became a mother. There's nothing more ruthless than protecting your child. It's risky. There are 1,000 ways it could go wrong. Name one that's better. He couldn't. They both knew it. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of impossible decisions and dangerous possibilities. Finally, Marco pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke quietly in Italian to whoever answered. When he hung up, his expression was resolved but grim. "I'm calling a meeting tomorrow night, every family head in the region. I'm going to announce my retirement." Just like that? Just like that. Before I can second-guess myself. Before the Morettis can make another move. Marco moved toward the bedroom. "I need to make more calls, set this in motion before I lose my nerve." He paused at the doorway, looked back at her. "This could blow up in our faces, you know. Could make things worse instead of better." "I know. And you're okay with that risk?" Evelyn thought about the laser sight on Luca's carrier, the phone call in the middle of the night, the endless fear that had become their daily reality. "I'm okay with trying, because what we're doing now isn't sustainable. Something has to change." "Agreed." Marco hesitated, then said quietly, "Thank you for thinking of this, for seeing a path when I couldn't. We're a team, remember? You said we'd do this together." "I did. And I meant it." He disappeared into his room, already dialing, already setting wheels in motion that couldn't be stopped. Evelyn checked on Luca, still sleeping peacefully, then returned to the living room where Vincent stood watch. "You heard?" she asked. "Enough. Mr. DeLuca is stepping down." "Do you think it will work?" Vincent's expression was carefully neutral. "I think it's the boldest move he could make. Whether it works depends on how well he sells it and how quickly the power vacuum fills. And if it doesn't work, then we'll deal with that when it happens. But for what it's worth, I think you're right. The status quo is unsustainable. This at least gives you a chance." The next day passed in tense preparation. Marco made call after call, reaching out to allies and enemies alike, setting up the meeting that would either save them or destroy them. Evelyn tried to maintain normalcy for Luca, playing with him, feeding him, pretending her stomach wasn't in knots. By evening, the apartment was filled with additional security. Vincent coordinated teams, checked equipment, went over contingencies. Marco dressed in an immaculate suit, looking every inch the powerful man he was about to claim he no longer wanted to be. "You should stay here," he said to Evelyn. "This meeting isn't going to be pleasant." "I'm coming with you." "Evelyn, if you're doing this for us, then I should be there. They should see why you're stepping down. See that you have something more important than power." Marco studied her for a long moment. "It could be dangerous. These aren't people who respond well to surprises." "Then it's good I've had practice dealing with dangerous men." Despite everything, Marco smiled slightly. "Fine. But you stay close to Vincent, and at the first sign of trouble, you leave. No arguments." "Agreed." They left Luca with a trusted member of Marco's security team, a woman named Sophia who'd worked for the family for 15 years. Evelyn hated leaving him, but bringing a baby to a meeting of crime bosses seemed like a spectacularly bad idea. The meeting was held in a private room at an upscale restaurant in the North End. Neutral territory, or as neutral as anything got in Marco's world. Vincent swept the room before they entered, confirmed the presence of the other family's security, made sure everyone was following the agreed-upon protocols. Inside, 5 men sat around a large table. Evelyn recognized 2 of them from society events during her marriage: Antonio Calabrese and Michael Chen, heads of families that operated in different spheres but occasionally intersected with Marco's interests. The others were strangers, but their body language spoke volumes. These were men used to power, to command, to getting what they wanted through force or fear. At the head of the table sat Dominic Moretti, older than Marco by a decade, with silver hair and cold eyes that tracked their entrance like a predator watching prey. "Marco," he said, "you asked for this meeting. We're here. What's so important it couldn't wait?" Marco pulled out a chair for Evelyn, a gesture so automatic he probably didn't even think about it, then took his own seat. Vincent positioned himself behind them, alert and ready. "Gentlemen," Marco began, "I appreciate you coming on short notice. I have an announcement that affects all of us, and I wanted you to hear it directly from me." "This should be interesting," Moretti said. Marco ignored the sarcasm. "I'm stepping down. Effective immediately, I'm retiring from active leadership of my family's business interests. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Calabrese laughed, a short bark of disbelief. You're joking. I'm not. I'm done. Finished. I'm naming my cousin Roberto as my successor. He'll take over all operations, all territories, all agreements currently in place. I'll be available for consultation during the transition, but after that, I'm out. Why? Chen's voice was sharp with suspicion. This doesn't make sense. You're at the height of your power. Why walk away? Marco gestured to Evelyn. Because I have a son, 6 months old, and I want to be alive to watch him grow up. I want to be a father, not a target, and I'm done risking everything for a business that will kill me eventually if I let it. Touching, Moretti said. But I don't believe you. I don't care if you believe me, I'm telling you what's happening. Roberto will reach out to each of you individually to ensure smooth transitions. Any ongoing negotiations continue under his authority. Any disputes get addressed through the normal channels. Nothing changes except who's making the decisions. Everything changes. Moretti stood, planting his hands on the table. You think you can just walk away? After everything you've built? After all the enemies you've made? You're a target for life, Marco. Retiring doesn't change that. Maybe not, but it changes my priorities, and it removes me from the equation of whatever power plays you're all running. I'm not a threat anymore. I'm just a father trying to keep his family safe. By abandoning your real family? Calabrese gestured broadly. The people who've worked with you, counted on you, built their operations around yours? You're going to leave them hanging? Roberto is capable. More capable than I was at his age. He'll take care of everyone. And if we don't accept this? Moretti's voice dropped to something dangerous. If we decide that your retirement isn't good enough? That we have unfinished business? Marco met his eyes without flinching. Then you'll have to decide if that unfinished business is worth going to war over. Because I promise you, Dominic, if you come after my family, my wife, and my son, I won't retire quietly. I'll burn your entire organization to the ground before I let you touch them. Your wife? Moretti's gaze shifted to Evelyn. I thought you were divorced. We're working on reconciliation, Evelyn said before Marco could answer. For our son's sake. And yes, before you ask, I'm the reason he's stepping down. I won't raise a child in constant fear. I won't spend every day wondering if today is the day someone comes after us to get to him. So Marco made a choice, his family or his empire. He chose us. How noble, Moretti's sarcasm was thick. And you expect us to just accept this? To believe that Marco De Luca, the man who spent 15 years building one of the most powerful operations on the East Coast, is suddenly going to play house and change diapers? I don't care what you believe, Marco said. I'm not asking permission. I'm informing you as a courtesy. What you do with that information is up to you. But understand this. I'm out of the game. If you have problems with Roberto, take it up with him. If you have problems with me personally, we can settle them like civilized men. But my family is off limits. Completely and permanently off limits. That's not negotiable. Chen leaned back in his chair, studying Marco with calculating eyes. Let's say we believe you. Let's say you really are stepping down. What happens to your offshore accounts, your political connections, your enforcement capabilities? Those don't transfer with a handshake. Roberto will have access to everything he needs to run the business. The rest I'm liquidating or shutting down. I'm simplifying, downsizing, making myself as uninteresting as possible. That's going to leave a power vacuum, Calabrese said. Vacuums get filled, usually violently. Then fill it. Fight over the scraps if you want. Just leave me out of it. Moretti walked around the table, stopping a few feet from where Marco sat. You know what I think? I think this is a play. I think you're setting something up, using your kid as cover, and in 6 months you'll come back stronger than ever. Well, I'm not falling for it, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend I believe your sudden attack of conscience. Marco stood, matching Moretti's aggressive posture. Believe what you want. But if you come after my family based on your paranoid theories, I will end you. Not your business, not your operations. You, personally. Are we clear? The tension in the room was explosive. Vincent shifted slightly, ready to move. The other security personnel around the room tensed. This could go bad very quickly. Then Chen spoke, his voice cutting through the standoff. Dominic, sit down. This isn't productive. He's playing us. Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't. But threatening his family isn't going to give us answers, and it's definitely going to start a war none of us can afford right now. Chen looked at Marco. I'll take you at your word. For now. You step down, Roberto takes over, and we see how it plays out. But Marco, if this is a game, if you're positioning for something bigger, we will find out, and then all bets are off. It's not a game. It's survival. And I'm tired of playing. One by one, the other family heads nodded their acceptance. Grudging, suspicious, but acceptance nonetheless. Moretti was the last to concede, his glare promising that this wasn't over. Fine, he said. You're out. But I'm watching. And the moment you step back in, the moment you make one move that looks like business as usual, I'm coming for you. You won't see me make any moves, because I'm done. The meeting broke up with tense handshakes and promises to be in touch with Roberto. As they left, Evelyn could feel eyes on her back, could sense the speculation and doubt. They didn't believe Marco. Not really. They thought this was manipulation, strategy, some complex play they hadn't figured out yet. Maybe it was better that way. Let them watch and wait and waste resources on surveillance. As long as they weren't actively attacking, Marco and Evelyn would have time to disappear. In the car, Marco was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "That went better than expected. They don't trust you." "I know, but they're not immediately planning to kill me either. That's progress." "What happens now?" "Now we wait. I transition everything to Roberto over the next few weeks. Make it clear I'm serious. Then we leave. Quietly. Before anyone decides to test whether I really am out." "Where do we go?" Marco looked at her, and in the dim light of the passing streetlights, Evelyn saw hope mixed with fear. "Wherever you want. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere safe. Somewhere Luca can grow up normal." "Do you even know what normal is?" "No, but I'm willing to learn." They arrived back at the apartment to find Luca awake and fussy. Evelyn took him from Sophia, held him close, breathed in his baby smell. He was fine. They were all fine. For now. Over the next 2 weeks, Marco systematically dismantled everything he'd built. He met with Roberto daily, transferring knowledge, contacts, access codes. He sold off properties, closed accounts, dissolved partnerships. It was like watching someone delete their own existence piece by piece. The Morettis watched. Chen's people watched. Everyone watched, waiting for the trap, the trick, the moment when Marco would reveal this was all elaborate theater. But the moment never came. 3 weeks after the meeting, Marco came to Evelyn with a folder of documents. "New identities," he said, "for all of us. Birth certificates, social security numbers, credit histories going back 5 years, completely clean." "Who are we?" "The Morrison family, David, Emily, and Lucas, from Seattle, moving to Portland for my new job in tech consulting." "You don't know anything about tech consulting." "I'll learn. I've learned everything else." Evelyn looked at the documents, at the faces in the photos that were them but also not them. A new life, a clean slate. Everything she'd wanted when she'd first run from Marco, but this time with him instead of away from him. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow, before anyone can set up another trap, before someone decides to test my retirement more aggressively." Marco took her hands. "Last chance to change your mind. Once we do this, there's no going back. No reclaiming the old life. We'll be nobody. Anonymous. Normal. I was nobody before I met you. I can be nobody again. You were never nobody. But I understand what you mean." He pulled her closer. "Are you sure about this? About us?" "You're tying yourself to me again, Evelyn, taking a risk that I won't revert to who I was. You're taking the same risk with me, that I won't run again when things get hard." She touched his face, made him look at her. "But I think we're both different now. You're not the man who needed to control everything, and I'm not the woman who was afraid to fight for what she wanted. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it is." That night, they packed the essentials, clothes for Luca, documents, a few personal items. Everything else would be left behind. The expensive furniture, the artwork, the symbols of wealth and power. None of it mattered compared to the baby sleeping in the nursery, blissfully unaware that his entire world was about to change. Vincent drove them to the airport personally, using a route designed to lose any surveillance. At the private terminal, he handed Marco a phone. Untraceable. One number programmed in. Mine. You need anything, you call. Thank you, Vincent, for everything. Take care of them, Mr. DeLuca, or Mr. Morrison, whoever you're going to be. I will. They boarded a red-eye to Portland, Luca secured in his carrier between them. As the plane lifted off, Evelyn watched Boston disappear below, the city lights spreading out like stars. Any regrets? Marco asked. She thought about it. About the life they were leaving, the power and prestige and endless complications. About the fear that had colored every moment, the violence that had lurked around every corner. No, she said. No regrets. Good, because I have a confession. What? I don't actually know how to change a diaper without your help. I've been faking competence. Despite everything, Evelyn laughed. Real laughter, the kind she hadn't felt in years. You're going to learn, fast, because in Portland, you don't have staff. You have me, and you have Luca, and you have whatever normal people have. Normal people have instructions, right? Like manuals? Sure. They're called parenting books. I'll get you a library card. Marco smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. A library card, for me. The world really has turned upside down. Welcome to normal, Marco. David, he corrected. We should practice. David Morrison, tech consultant, father, husband. We're not married. Not yet. But I'm working on that too. He took her hand, threaded their fingers together. One thing at a time. First we disappear, then we build something real. Then maybe, if you'll have me, we make it official again, but better this time. Better how? Honest, equal, built on trust instead of control. A real partnership. Evelyn squeezed his hand. I'd like that. Luca stirred between them, making sleepy sounds. They both looked down at him, this tiny person who'd changed everything, who'd forced them to choose between power and love, between empire and family. Thank you, Marco said quietly, for giving me another chance, for not giving up on us completely. Thank you for being willing to walk away from everything for him. For us. It wasn't even a choice. Not really. The moment I saw him in that hospital, the moment I held him, I knew nothing else mattered. The plane pushed through clouds into clear sky, stars visible through the windows. Somewhere below, the world they'd known continued without them. Roberto was probably already making his first moves as the new head of the family. The Morettis were probably still watching, waiting for the trick. Chen and Calabrese were probably calculating how to benefit from the power shift. Let them, Evelyn thought. Let them fight over territory and influence and all the things that used to seem so important. She had everything that mattered right here. A son. A man who'd chosen her over his empire, and the possibility of a future built on something more solid than fear. It wouldn't be easy. Normal never was, in its own way. They'd have to learn how to be ordinary people, how to navigate regular jobs and neighbors and PTA meetings. They'd have to constantly watch for signs that someone had found them, that the past had caught up. But they'd face it together. And somehow, that made all the difference. Portland greeted them with rain, which felt appropriate somehow. A fresh start should come with clean water, washing away the old life. Marco had rented a modest house in the suburb of Lake Oswego. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, the kind of place where young families lived and no one asked too many questions about your past. The first week was strange. Marco wandered the house like he wasn't sure what to do with rooms that didn't require security clearance to enter. He stood in the kitchen staring at the ordinary appliances as if they were alien technology. It's just a coffee maker, Evelyn said, watching him puzzle over the machine. I know what it is. I'm just trying to remember how to use one. I've had people making my coffee for 15 years. Welcome to adulthood. You push the button. Water goes through grounds. Coffee comes out. That seems inefficient. That's because you're used to espresso machines that cost more than this entire kitchen. She took Luca from his carrier, settled him on her hip. But this is what normal people use, so you're going to learn to love it. Marco pushed the button. The machine sputtered to life, filling the kitchen with the smell of mediocre coffee. He took a sip and made a face. This is terrible. This is normal. Get used to it. Despite the adjustment, they fell into a rhythm. Marco took online courses in software development, building the background for his cover story as a tech consultant. Evelyn found remote work with a small accounting firm. Nothing glamorous, but it paid bills and didn't ask questions. They took turns with Luca, learning his schedule, his preferences, the thousand small details of his personality. The days were quiet, almost boring. It was glorious. 3 months passed without incident. No suspicious cars, no threatening phone calls, no midnight visitors. Vincent checked in once a week through encrypted messages, reporting that Roberto was consolidating power successfully and the other families seemed to be accepting the new order. The Morettis had backed off, satisfied that Marco really had retired. Evelyn started to believe they might actually pull this off. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. She was at the grocery store with Luca, navigating the produce section while he babbled happily in the shopping cart, when she felt it, the crawling sensation between her shoulder blades that meant someone was watching. She turned slowly, scanning the other shoppers, looking for anything out of place. There, by the organic bananas. A man in a dark jacket, pretending to examine fruit while his eyes tracked her movement. Not obvious enough to be threatening, but not subtle enough to be coincidence. Evelyn kept shopping, her mind racing. Could be nothing. Could be paranoia. Could be exactly what she feared. She paid for her groceries, loaded Luca into his car seat, drove home using a route that would expose any tail. The dark jacket appeared 3 cars back, stayed there through 2 turns, disappeared at the 3rd. Professional. Careful. Exactly the kind of surveillance Marco had taught her to spot. She pulled into the driveway, grabbed Luca and the groceries, got inside, and locked the door behind her. Marco was at the kitchen table, laptop open, working through some coding tutorial. He looked up when she entered, saw her expression, was on his feet immediately. What happened? Someone was watching me. At the store. Dark jacket, professional surveillance technique. He followed for 3 blocks, then dropped off. Marco was already moving, checking windows, pulling curtains, his body language shifting from relaxed to combat-ready in seconds. This was the man she'd married, the one who operated on instinct and paranoia and razor-sharp awareness. Could be coincidence, he said, but his voice suggested he didn't believe it. Could be, but you taught me not to believe in coincidences. Did you get a good look at him? Not his face, but his posture, the way he moved. He was trained, military or private security. Marco pulled out his phone, the untraceable one Vincent had given them, and made a call. Spoke quietly in Italian, asking questions, demanding answers. When he hung up, his expression was grim. Vincent says there's been chatter, someone asking questions about the De Luca family's former associates, specifically about anyone who left the business around the same time I did. The Morettis? Unknown. Could be them. Could be someone else who thinks I'm hiding assets or planning a comeback. Marco moved to the window, looked out at their quiet suburban street. Could be federal agents following up on old investigations. There are too many possibilities. So what do? We prepare, and we wait. See if this was a probe or the beginning of something worse. That night, Marco didn't sleep. Evelyn found him at 2 a.m., standing guard in Luca's room, watching their son sleep while his mind clearly ran through scenarios and contingencies. Come to bed, she said softly. I can't. Not until I know what we're dealing with. You can't protect him by exhausting yourself. I can't protect him if I miss something because I was sleeping. Marco turned from the crib. What if this is it? What if someone figured out where we are? What if bringing you and Luca here was the biggest mistake I've ever made? Or what if it was one guy who happened to notice an attractive woman in the grocery store and followed her for completely non-threatening reasons? You don't believe that. No, but I don't want to panic before we have real information either. Evelyn moved to stand beside him. We knew this was a risk when we left. We knew someone might come looking eventually, but we're prepared. We have plans, exit strategies, resources. We're not helpless. You're not, but Luca is. And that terrifies me more than anything I've ever faced. The raw honesty in his voice made Evelyn's chest tight. This was the man she'd fallen in love with. The one beneath the armor and control, the one who felt things deeply but showed it rarely. "We'll protect him," she said, "together, like we've been doing, one day at a time." Marco nodded, but he didn't leave the nursery, didn't stop watching over their son like a sentinel against the darkness. The next day brought answers. Vincent called with information that made Marco's expression go dark and dangerous. "It's not the Morettis," he said after hanging up. "It's worse. Federal task force. They've been investigating the DeLuca organization for 18 months. They think I'm cooperating with Roberto, feeding him information from the outside. They want to bring me in for questioning." "Can they do that? You haven't done anything illegal since we left." "They don't know that, and they don't care. They see an opportunity to flip me, use me against Roberto and the other families. They're applying pressure to see if I'll crack. So we lawyer up. We refuse to cooperate. We run." Marco's voice was flat. "Because if federal agents are here, it means our location is compromised, which means it's only a matter of time before someone else finds us. Someone less interested in questioning and more interested in revenge." "Run where?" "I don't know yet, but we can't stay here." He moved to the bedroom, started pulling out bags. "Pack light, essentials only. We leave tonight." "Marco, wait, maybe we can—" "There's no maybe. There's no negotiating with this. We're exposed. We have to move." Evelyn watched him pack with efficient, almost mechanical movements. This was the Marco she'd left, the one who made unilateral decisions, who didn't ask or discuss, just commanded and expected obedience. "Stop," she said. He didn't stop. "Marco, stop." He turned, and the look in his eyes was wild, desperate. "We don't have time to discuss this, Evelyn. We need to move now before what? Before the FBI asks you some questions? Before we have to explain that you really did retire? Before we have to live like adults and deal with consequences instead of running? This isn't about running from consequences. This is about keeping you and Luca safe. By dragging us to another city? Another identity? How many times, Marco? How many times do we run before you accept that maybe, possibly, we can't outrun this forever? As many times as it takes. That's not a life. That's not what I want for Luca. Constantly moving, constantly hiding, never putting down roots or making friends or having anything stable." Evelyn moved closer, made him look at her. "I left you once because you were trying to control everything. Don't make me leave you again for the same reason." Marco's hands were shaking, actually shaking. "I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to keep you safe if we stay." "So we figure it out, together. We talk to Vincent, get more information. We consult with lawyers who specialize in this kind of thing. We make a plan based on facts instead of fear." She took his hands, steadied them with hers. "But we don't just run, not this time. Not unless we absolutely have to." She watched him struggle with it, the need to take action warring with the promise he'd made to include her in decisions. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, we gather information first, but if the situation deteriorates, we move immediately. No arguments." "Fair enough?" They spent the next 2 days in careful research. Vincent connected them with a lawyer who specialized in federal cases involving organized crime. The lawyer reviewed Marco's situation and delivered surprisingly good news. "You haven't been charged with anything," he explained over a secure video call. "The task force is fishing. They think you might have useful information, but they have no grounds to compel testimony. As long as you haven't committed any crime since retiring, and as long as you maintain that you have no current involvement with your former organization, they can't touch you." "What if they don't believe me?" Marco asked. "Then they'll try to prove otherwise. Surveillance, financial audits, the whole 9 yards. But Mr. Morrison," the lawyer used Marco's new name deliberately, "you've been exceedingly careful. Your finances are clean. Your employment history is documented. As far as the law is concerned, you're exactly who you claim to be. A former businessman who stepped away from a family enterprise to focus on raising his son. And if someone from my old life contradicts that story, without evidence of ongoing criminal activity, their testimony is just hearsay. The task force would need concrete proof that you're still involved. Do they have that?" Marco looked at Evelyn. "No, they don't." "Then my advice is simple. If approached by federal agents, you politely decline to answer questions without your attorney present. You maintain your current lifestyle. You don't contact anyone from your previous life, and you wait for them to lose interest and move on to more promising targets. It sounded almost too easy. But over the following weeks, the surveillance faded. The dark jackets stopped appearing. The lawyer reported that the task force had shifted focus to Roberto and the current leadership, apparently satisfied that Marco really was out of the game. Life settled again. Marco's online courses turned into actual freelance consulting work, small projects, nothing glamorous, but legitimate income that built his cover story. Evelyn got promoted at her accounting firm. Luca started pulling himself up on furniture, preparing to walk. They were becoming the Morrison family for real. 6 months after arriving in Portland, Marco proposed again, not with a massive diamond or a dramatic gesture, but quietly, one evening after putting Luca to bed. "Marry me," he said. Evelyn looked up from the dishes she was washing. "We're already married." Marco and Evelyn were married. I'm asking if Emily Morrison wants to marry David Morrison, for real this time. Not because of family obligations or business alliances or any of the complicated reasons we did it the first time. Just because I love you and I want to build this life with you. We're already building this life. I know, but I want it official. I want to stand in front of people who know us as David and Emily and promise to love you as this version of me, the one you helped me become. Evelyn dried her hands on a towel, moved to where Marco stood in the kitchen doorway. Are you sure? Because marriage didn't work out so well for us the first time. We didn't work out the first time because I was trying to be someone I thought I had to be, the powerful heir, the commanding boss, the man who controlled everything. But that's not who I want to be anymore. I want to be Luca's father, your husband, a normal person living a normal life. You'll never be normal, Marco. David, he corrected with a slight smile. And maybe not. But I can try. If you'll let me. Evelyn thought about the man she'd married 4 years ago, the one who'd swept her into a world of danger and luxury, who'd loved her intensely but suffocated her with protection. Then she looked at the man standing in front of her now, the one who'd walked away from everything to keep his son safe, who made terrible coffee and struggled with coding tutorials and changed diapers without complaint. They weren't the same person. Not entirely. Okay, she said. Ask me properly. Marco dropped to one knee right there in their ordinary kitchen, pulled out a simple gold band, nothing like the massive engagement ring from before. Emily Morrison, will you marry me? No expectations, no conditions, no strings attached except the promise to love you and Luca and this life we're building for as long as I live. Yes, but on one condition. Name it. No more secrets, no more unilateral decisions. We're partners in everything, even the hard stuff. Especially the hard stuff, Marco agreed. Partners. Equal. I promise. They got married at the courthouse 3 weeks later. No elaborate wedding, no hundreds of guests, no society pages recording the event. Just them, Luca in a tiny suit, and 2 witnesses they'd met at the local parents group. Simple, quiet, and perfect. Life continued its steady rhythm. Seasons changed. Luca took his first steps, spoke his first words, grew from infant to toddler with alarming speed. Marco became genuinely good at his consulting work, building a reputation in the tech community as thorough and reliable. Evelyn made friends at work, joined a book club, did all the normal things she'd never had time for when she was Mrs. DeLuca. They almost forgot to be afraid. Almost. 1 year after leaving Boston, Vincent called with news. Roberto had been arrested. Federal task force had finally built a case strong enough to move forward. The entire DeLuca organization was being dismantled, piece by piece. What does this mean for us? Marco asked. Nothing. Unless you make it mean something, Vincent said. Roberto hasn't mentioned your name. Neither has anyone else in the organization. As far as the federal case is concerned, you don't exist. You stepped down before any of the criminal activity they're prosecuting occurred. You're sure? I've seen the indictment. Your name isn't in it. Neither is Evelyn's. You're clean. Marco hung up, looked at Evelyn, who'd been listening on speaker. We're really free. Looks like it. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. No more surveillance. No more fear. How does it feel? Marco pulled her into his arms, held her close. Terrifying. I've spent my entire adult life managing threats. Now there are no threats to manage. I don't know what to do with that. You live, Evelyn said simply. You enjoy your family. You take Luca to the park and teach him to ride a bike and help him with homework. You be normal. I'm still not good at normal. You're getting better. Give it time. That night, for the first time since Luca was born, Marco slept through until morning. No midnight patrols. No checking security systems. Just deep, peaceful sleep beside his wife while their son dozed safely down the hall. The next 2 years proved Vincent right. The federal case destroyed what remained of the DeLuca organization, sending Roberto and dozens of others to prison. The Morettis expanded into the vacant territory. The other families carved up what was left. And David Morrison, tech consultant from Seattle, went completely unnoticed. Luca started preschool, made friends, came home talking about dinosaurs and finger painting and all the wonderfully ordinary concerns of a 4-year-old. He had no memory of Boston, no knowledge of the danger that had surrounded his first months of life. He just knew that his daddy worked from home and his mommy laughed more than she used to, and they were happy. On Luca's 5th birthday, they threw a party in their backyard. Neighborhood kids ran around screaming, hopped up on cake and sugar. Parents stood in clusters talking about school districts and soccer leagues and home renovation projects. Normal people living normal lives. Marco stood at the edge of it all, watching Luca tackle another child in an exuberant hug, and felt Evelyn come up beside him. "You did good," she said. "We did good. This was your idea, remember? Leaving, starting over, choosing this life. You're the one who actually did it, who walked away from everything. I traded an empire for this." Marco gestured at the chaos of the birthday party. "Best deal I ever made." "No regrets?" "About leaving? None. About the years before? Some. I put you through hell. We put each other through hell, but we came out the other side." Evelyn leaned against his shoulder. "And look what we got." Luca chose that moment to run over, face covered in frosting, pure joy radiating from every inch of him. "Daddy! Daddy! Can we do presents now?" Marco crouched to his son's level. "What's the magic word?" "Please, pretty please with sprinkles." "Close enough. Go tell everyone it's present time." Luca ran off shouting the announcement. Marco stood, felt Evelyn's hand slip into his. "Think he'll ever know?" she asked quietly. "About who we used to be?" "Maybe someday, when he's old enough to understand. But for now, he just gets to be a kid. Safe, happy, loved. That's enough. More than enough." They walked together toward the present table where Luca was already tearing into wrapping paper with the enthusiasm only a 5-year-old could muster. Around them, the party continued its cheerful chaos. Someone's phone rang. A child cried over a scraped knee. The neighbor's dog barked at the commotion. Normal sounds, normal problems, a normal life. Everything Marco had sworn he'd never have. Everything Evelyn had been certain was impossible. And yet here they were, living it, breathing it, making it work one ordinary day at a time. That evening, after the guests had left and Luca had finally crashed from his sugar high, Marco and Evelyn cleaned up the remnants of the party. Paper plates and plastic cups, deflated balloons, the scattered debris of celebration. "You know what I realized today?" Marco said, tying off a garbage bag. "What?" "I spent 20 years learning how to run a criminal empire. How to negotiate with dangerous people, how to stay 3 moves ahead, how to survive in a world where trust was weakness. And none of that prepared me for this. For being a father, for being a husband who doesn't give orders, for being normal. You're doing okay at it. I'm terrified every day that I'll mess it up, that I'll revert to old patterns, that I'll try to control everything again and drive you away." Evelyn set down the trash bag she was holding, moved to stand in front of him. "You want to know the difference between now and before?" "What?" "Before, you never would have admitted you were terrified. You never would have said you were worried about messing up. You just would have forged ahead, certain you knew best, leaving destruction in your wake." She touched his face. "The fact that you're afraid means you care. The fact that you question yourself means you're learning. That's what makes this work." "I love you," Marco said. Simple words, but weighted with everything they'd survived to get here. "I love you too." Both versions. The one I married and the one you became. They're both you. Just don't ask me to put a suit back on. I've gotten used to jeans and t-shirts. Deal. And I've gotten used to you actually being here. Present. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Don't lose that. I won't. I promise. They finished cleaning as the sun set, painting the Portland sky in shades of orange and pink. Through the window, they could see Luca's toys scattered across the lawn. A plastic slide, a collection of trucks, a sandbox that Marco had built himself after watching 3 different YouTube tutorials. Evidence of the life they'd built. Proof that walking away from power didn't mean losing everything. Sometimes it meant gaining something more valuable. Later that night, after Luca was tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Marco stood at their bedroom window looking out at their quiet street. No security details, no cameras, no armed guards watching the perimeter. Just streetlights and occasional cars and the peaceful stillness of suburbia. "You okay?" Evelyn asked from the bed. "Yeah, just thinking. About what we could have lost. About how close we came to a very different ending. About how lucky we are to be here." Luck had nothing to do with it. We fought for this, made impossible choices, walked away from everything familiar. Evelyn patted the bed beside her. "Come here, stop brooding." Marco joined her, and she curled into his side the way she had when they were first married, before everything got complicated. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. The excitement, the luxury, the sense of being part of something bigger. "Sometimes I miss the fancy coffee," Evelyn admitted. "And the clothes, but mostly, no. I don't miss walking on eggshells. I don't miss the fear. I don't miss wondering if today was the day someone would hurt you to get to your family. What about the good parts? The way I used to make you feel protected, wanted, like you were the center of my universe. You still do all those things, just differently. Better, actually, because now it comes from choice instead of obsession." She looked up at him. "The old Marco loved me desperately, but couldn't see past his need to control me. This Marco loves me enough to let me be my own person. That's worth more than all the luxury in the world. This Marco still wants to control things sometimes. Old habits. I know, but you fight it. That's what matters." They lay together in comfortable silence, listening to the house settle around them. Somewhere down the hall, Luca made a sound in his sleep. Not distress, just the random noises of dreams. Marco started to get up to check on him. Evelyn pulled him back. "He's fine. The monitor would tell us if he wasn't." "I know, but I like checking. You like making sure he's real, that this is real." Marco smiled slightly. "Is that so wrong?" "No, it's actually kind of sweet, but you need sleep too. Luca has soccer practice tomorrow, and you're the coach." "Assistant coach. Tom is the real coach. I just help with drills. Either way, you need rest. So stop brooding about the past and be here. Now. With me." Marco settled back into bed, pulled her close. "Being here now? Check. What else?" "That's it. That's the whole secret to this normal life you're so worried about mastering. Just be present. Love us. Do your best. The rest works itself out." Sounds too simple. Most profound things are. Evelyn yawned, already drifting towards sleep. "You'll figure it out. You always do." As she slept beside him, Marco thought about the journey that had brought them here. The phone call that changed everything. The hospital where he'd first held his son. The dangerous weeks when threats had circled like sharks. The impossible decision to walk away from power. The year of hiding and rebuilding. And finally, this, peace. It wasn't the ending he'd expected. When he'd built his empire, he'd imagined dying in his office at 90, still pulling strings, still commanding respect and fear. He'd never imagined suburbia. Never imagined coaching children's soccer. Never imagined that the greatest achievement of his life would be learning to make mediocre coffee and change diapers without complaint. But here he was, David Morrison. Father, husband, former crime boss turned ordinary man, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Luca bounded into their bedroom at 6 a.m., full of energy and demands for pancakes. Marco stumbled to the kitchen, still half asleep, and attempted to make breakfast while Evelyn showered. "Daddy, you're doing it wrong," Luca announced, watching critically. "What am I doing wrong?" Mommy puts chocolate chips in them. Does she now? Uh-huh. E. Lots of chocolate chips. Marco added chocolate chips to the batter, wondering when his life had become negotiating breakfast with a 5-year-old, and realizing he was perfectly happy with that reality. They ate pancakes together, the three of them crowded around their ordinary kitchen table. Luca chattered about his upcoming soccer game. Evelyn planned their grocery list. Marco contributed opinions on whether they needed more milk. Domestic, mundane, perfect. This was what he'd walked away from an empire to have. These quiet mornings, this ordinary happiness, this family. Worth it, he thought. Every sacrifice, every fear, every moment of uncertainty, all of it worth it for this. As they cleared the table together, Luca asked suddenly, "Daddy, were you always a computer person?" Marco met Evelyn's eyes across the kitchen. "No, buddy. I used to do something different." "What did you do?" "I ran a business, but it wasn't the right kind of business for me, so I changed careers to spend more time with you and Mommy." "Oh." Luca considered this with the seriousness only children could bring to simple concepts. "I'm glad you did. You're good at soccer coaching." "Thanks, buddy. And pancakes, even without enough chocolate chips." Marco laughed, scooped Luca up despite protests that he was too big for that. "Come on, sport. Let's get you ready for practice." As he carried his son down the hallway, Evelyn watching with a smile, Marco felt something he'd never quite experienced before. Contentment. Not the temporary satisfaction of a successful deal or eliminated threat, but deep, lasting contentment with exactly where he was and who he'd become. The empire was gone. The power was gone. The fear and violence and endless complications were gone. And in their place was this: a small house in Portland, a family he'd choose over everything else, and a future built on love instead of control. Marco De Luca had ceased to exist. But David Morrison was finally, truly alive. And that, he thought as he helped Luca find his soccer cleats, was the best ending he could have asked for. Outside, the Portland sun shone on their quiet street. Neighbors waved as they left for soccer practice. Other children played in yards. Dogs barked. Life continued in all its ordinary, beautiful complexity. No one noticed the former crime boss coaching youth soccer. No one knew about the woman who'd run from danger and found safety. No one suspected that the happy family loading into their minivan had once been at the center of a criminal empire. They were just the Morrisons. Normal. Anonymous. Free. And somewhere in Boston, the world they'd left behind continued without them, but it no longer defined them, no longer controlled them, no longer threatened them. They'd escaped. Not just physically, but completely. And they'd built something better in the process. As they drove toward the soccer field, Luca chattering excitedly in the back seat, Evelyn reached over and took Marco's hand. "Happy?" she asked. Marco looked at his son in the rearview mirror, at his wife beside him, at the ordinary suburban landscape passing by the windows. "Yeah," he said. "I really am." And he meant it, every word. The call that should never have come had led them here, to safety, to family, to a life worth living. Sometimes the hardest choices led to the best destinations. Sometimes walking away from everything was the only way to find what truly mattered. They'd learned that lesson the hard way. But they'd learned it together, and that made all the difference.